This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, Ash, Christopher Mitchell, and 212th Trooper. Our story begins the way many stories do, with a boybot, a girltron, and a pair of handcuffs. Specifically, the duo in question are Starscream and RC, as following Arachnid's betrayal and abandonment of the Decepticon 2IC to the Autobots, Starscream had made a rather startling declaration that he wishes to join their ranks. Naturally, this has been met with a great deal of skepticism, though in an attempt to ingratiate himself, Starscream had offered to lead his new quote-unquote comrades to the location of the Harbinger, the very Decepticon warship that he and Arachnid had been seeking out on Megatron's orders. Figuring that they should at least check the veracity of this intel and stop Megatron from acquiring a dangerous new weapon, the Autobots had made their way to the coordinates with a cuffed Starscream in tow, warning that any duplicity would be met with swift and lethal action. This had been where RC had come into the picture, as despite her desire to scrap Arachnid, Optimus had assigned her to guard their prisoner, with the Autobot and Decepticon pair soon getting to talking about their shared loathing for their spider-themed mutual enemy. As in canon, RC lists Arachnid's greatest crime as killing her partner, with this being the point where the timelines diverge, as while normally Starscream would balk at this, scowling that Arachnid is taking credit for his achievements, and thus tipping RC off that he was the one who killed Cliffjumper. Here he holds his tongue, having a brief window of insight in which he realizes that if he admits he did it, RC will surely kill him, which would be the exact opposite of his highest goal, to save his own precious skin, which coincidentally is the correct term for the outer layer of a plane. To this end, Starscream swallows his pride and allows the comment to go unchallenged, instead using it to his advantage, as he grins that he sees why RC wants to get rid of that pesky spider, and suggests that perhaps she and he are not so different after all. Unfortunately, this attempt at manipulation is shut down with the force of a closing airlock, as the blue bike tells him to get one thing straight: they are not comrades and they're not friends. He's a con, and the moment he reveals whatever little scheme he's planning, she'll turn him into spare parts. Gulping worriedly, Starscream nods that this is duly noted, and that he quite understands why she distrusts him considering their history, though with time, he hopes he can prove himself an asset to the Autobot cause, as a way to make up for all his past transgressions. Growing tired of this toadying, RC snaps at him to be quiet or she'll cram him back in Optimus's trailer. An order Starscream is quick to obey, falling silent and only fidgeting slightly as the wing clamps the Autobots placed on him are dreadfully uncomfortable. Finally, after what feels like forever, Optimus, Bumblebee, and Bulkhead return, carrying with them a short staff which they explain is an immobilizer. While piping up, Starscream insists that his information was good, so surely they must now see that his reformation was genuine. As one, RC, Bulkhead, and Bumblebee all look doubtful, though in his measured voice, Optimus replies that as Alpha Trion taught him, all sentient beings are capable of change, even Decepticons. So for now, Starscream has earned his trust. Defaulting to his usual behavior in the presence of his leader, the lanky steel suck-up grovels that Optimus is too kind, before letting out a sigh of relief as RC removes his shackles and instructs him to follow her as the ground bridge opens up a few feet away. Walking in the center of the formation so that he is flanked by Autobots on all sides, Starscream suddenly finds himself in what he can only assume is their base, a cavernous structure carved seemingly out of stone, though he certainly hopes there is more to it than just one room, as sharing this space with 5 others would be rather cramped. As though he can read his mind, the great green brute Bulkhead slaps him on the back, telling Screamy, as he calls him, to come with him and he'll give him the tour. Seeing no alternative, Starscream follows, discovering there is a maze of corridors and doors behind this one room, though he is rather disappointed by the Spartan aesthetic of grey concrete, since say what you will about the Decepticon warship, at least it has ambiance. It is here that Bulkhead also stores the immobilizer, while giving Starscream a look that very clearly says, if you try and steal this, I will know, and I will stop you in the most painful way possible. A look he knows well from his time with Megatron. Adopting a wounded expression, Starscream simpers that the Autobot doesn't trust him, does he? To which he receives a rather blunt nope, though with the addendum that Optimus does, so he's willing to at least give him a chance. Recognizing this is more than most would offer, Starscream thanks his new comrade, while assuring him that he can be quite useful to their now shared cause. Unfortunately, this is met with the same indifference as his question, as the ex-wrecker tells him to take it up with Optimus, since he's the boss bot around here. Speaking of the Prime, when Starscream and Bulkhead return to the main area, Optimus and Ratchet are in the midst of what appears to be a debate around Starscream himself, as the Doctor insists that while he respects his leader's optimism, Starscream cannot be trusted, as he has proven himself time and again to be duplicitous, conniving, and utterly ruthless. Blithely, the ex-Decepticon adds that he forgot vindictive, which is precisely why he's here. He gave Megatron the best killer cycles of his life, yet he and his idiotic followers repaid him with nothing but contempt and cruelty, like he was some human they could step on whenever they felt like it. This comparison earns Starscream a rather angry shout, and looking over he sees one of the Autobot's pets, the female one, glaring up at him from the back of a couch. Evidently, Optimus Prime is equally unimpressed with his new subordinate's choice of words, firmly stating that if he is to be an Autobot, he will need to realize that all life is precious, and as the wielders of tremendous power, it is their duty to use that strength to protect those weaker than them, not demean or dominate them. Recognizing that he cannot argue this point without contradicting his own complaint about Megatron, as well as more than likely angering the other Autobots while in a confined space from which he cannot escape, Starscream merely nods that of course Optimus is right, before asking if there is any more wisdom the Prime wishes to impart to him. Ignoring the undertone of mockery, Optimus instead looks Starscream in the eye and earnestly replies that in time, there is much he hopes to teach him, as it is his fondest wish that the Decepticon defector will find his home among them, though for now, it would be prudent to discuss the rules Starscream will be required to follow. First and foremost, he is to do no harm to the life forms of this planet, though just as importantly, he must not alert them to the existence of Cybertronians, meaning when outside the base, he must maintain his vehicle form whenever in the presence of humans. Additionally, while his loyalty is being ascertained, he is not to leave the base without permission or an escort, the latter being something Starscream can readily agree to, as by now Arachnid will have informed Megatron that he is in the hands of the Autobots, and considering all the information he has on Decepticon operations, it is highly probable that his former master will conclude that the best way for Starscream to hold his tongue is if it and the rest of his head are several clicks removed from his body, meaning the safest place for him is out of sight. In an attempt to make his confinement as comfortable as possible, the Jetbot decides to ingratiate himself with the base's human infestation, approaching the loud female one and simpering that he fears they get off on the wrong foot, so perhaps they could start fresh. However, it seems this human spends much of her time in the presence of Bulkhead, as with the gruffness mirroring his, the girl snarks there's no chance, with his welcome being less abrasive but equally as cold from the older human male, while the younger expresses hope for Starscream's reformation, though also doubt. Unfortunately for the defector, these three are not in fact the only humans, as a few days later the base is visited by a shrill female who upon spotting Starscream's Decepticon insignia, orders him to stay away from her son, the black-haired boy Jack, as well as Special Agent William Fowler, the man he had personally tortured during the space bridge incident, and who understandably is none too happy to see him, demanding to know if Optimus is out of his sparking mind for letting a known enemy walk free. Admittedly, it is rather gratifying to hear a Prime vouch for him, though, like all conversations regarding him of late, it is accompanied by the caveat that should his reformation prove disingenuous, the Autobots will be able to subdue him. Being used to implied threats, Starscream does not even question this, nor does he attempt to cozy up with Fowler, instead begrudgingly performing the tasks he is assigned as a means of lowering his host's guard, as in his current predicament, all he can do is bide his time, and waiting for it to become clear whether his best interests lie with remaining an Autobot stooge, or striking out on his own beholden to none. As a result, he is forced to endure many menial tasks unfit for the lowest drone, such as cleaning the base, monitoring the comms when the Autobots are out on patrol, and doing inventory on their energon reserves. This last task proves particularly galling, not because of the drudgery, but because the result is more dire than he could have possibly anticipated. The Autobots are almost completely out of energon. Sure, the Decepticons had known they must be running low with no means to replenish their supply, but not even Megatron could have guessed it would be this low. At this rate, they'll be completely depleted in mere cycles, and if rationing and starvation are on the cards, he has a pretty good idea who'll be the first to have their supply cut off. Thankfully, Starscream just so happens to know a rich source of energon, and one with scant enough security the Autobots should be able to handle it, meaning this shortage might actually be a golden opportunity for him, as he can appear benevolent and useful, whilst having those goody 2 servers do the grunt labor instead of him for a change. To this end, the defector approaches Ratchet, evident concern in his face and tone as he admits to being startled by their energon count. Brusquely, the medic tells him not to worry his spiky head, since Optimus won't let them harvest his energon despite his belief that this would be the best use for the Decepticon, though Starscream protests that this isn't why he came to the good doctor. No, he wants to share some information he has on a still fertile energon mine. As expected, this gets Ratchet's attention, with the medic demanding to know why he didn't mention this earlier, which in turn causes Starscream's cowardice to kick in, as he recoils and squawks that he didn't think it was relevant until he saw how low on energon they were, having always taken a plentiful supply for granted. Accepting that on the balance of probability, this was arrogance and not a plot against them, Ratchet does not press any further, instead telling the cowering con to give him the information as they don't have time to waste. Nodding vigorously, Starscream relays the coordinates, with Ratchet's computer confirming there is a rock formation there that could house a mine. A promising start, though this is not enough for the Doctor to trust the Jetbot, as he calls the others in to discuss how they should approach what could be a lifeline, though could just as easily be a trap. Knowing better than to protest his innocence, Starscream listens silently for the duration of this meeting, with the ultimate verdict being that RC and Bumblebee will investigate, though they're to keep comms open at all times so the others can ground bridge in if trouble arises. However, to the Autobots' surprise, this is not necessary, as while there is a small contingent in the mine, they are simple workerbots who are easily taken by surprise, meaning that not only did Starscream give them helpful information, but he's just supplied them with a solution to their energon woes, at least for now. Even RC, as the most cynical among the group, has to admit that Scream did him a big favour today, so maybe, just maybe if he keeps it up, he could one day call himself an Autobot. Ratchet meanwhile insists that Starscream begin marking down the location of all the other mines, since it will not take Megatron long to realize they are siphoning his harvest, and when that happens, he imagines the Warlord will choose to destroy the mines rather than let his enemies have them, so they must move fast if they wish to replenish their supplies. Seeing no reason to refuse, Starscream complies, a wicked glee forming in his spark as he imagines his former master's face at the news that he, Starscream, has put a halt to energon acquisition. After all, Megatron never did appreciate his mining operations, so now they will see how he fares without them. Subsequently, the next several days are spent in a mad scramble to collect energon, with Starscream finding himself being left to his own devices more and more. While this could simply be put down to a lack of bot power as they can't afford to have someone rostered on to watch him at all times, a part of him has to wonder if this is some sort of reward for his cooperation, a largely foreign concept, as in the Decepticons, punishment for failure is the primary incentive rather than reward for success. In the chaos of energon collection, the Autobots almost miss the appearance of a Cybertronian data cylinder, though ever the consummate professional, Ratchet still manages to find it, dispatching Optimus and a few other Autobots to recover it, and subsequently sending Bulkhead as backup when it becomes clear the Decepticons also have their eyes on the device. From here, the events of TMI play out much like in canon, as there is not much Starscream can do to affect the proceedings, frankly not caring one way or the other whether the big lug Bulkhead loses personality, with it possibly being an improvement, as he and his human Miko insist on watching those incessant monster truck rallies, which make him feel as though he is living with an uncouth version of Knockout. However, due to the power of human sentimentality, Bulkhead is ultimately restored to normal, leaving behind a half-finished formula for synthetic energon that Ratchet naturally begins working on completing, though considering their renewed supply, which Starscream hastily points out is thanks to him, this is less of a priority. Though this is not to say that it is shelved entirely, just that all experiments are undertaken with a greater level of safeguards as they're not under the same pressure that forced Ratchet to conduct tests on himself. As a result, the next calamity to draw the Autobots' attention is not a medic high on his own supply, but instead the end of the world. In particular, Optimus Prime is concerned that the prophecy of doom from the Covenant of Primus is about to be fulfilled here on Earth due to an upcoming planetary alignment. Truthfully, Starscream finds himself agreeing with Bulkhead that this is superstitious nonsense, as he has always viewed Megatron's belief in such things as irksome, and just another means to inflate his own self-importance. However, in spite of all that, when Optimus Prime speaks of a rising darkness, he cannot help but believe him just a little. Unfortunately, it seems the Autobots will not have to wait long to find this rising darkness, as having been galvanized by the prophecy, Megatron has abandoned stealth in favor of a brazen daylight robbery from a top-secret military lab. While this is notable, what is even more so is the list of items the Decepticons have already stolen, with Ratchet correctly identifying them as the components for a new space bridge, while Starscream splutters indignantly that he can't believe they're going ahead with that without his supervision. At once, the Defector finds several sets of glowing eyes upon him, all evidently wondering if there are any more secrets he's keeping from them. Though in a tone of panic, Starscream screeches that he only neglected to mention it because he believed they wouldn't dare proceed without him. Having had his fill of Starscream using his arrogance as a justification for withholding information, Ratchet tells him that from now on, he is to inform them of anything he knows that might be relevant, no matter how unlikely or unimportant he thinks it is, earning him a shaky salute, though it seems now is not the time to begin divulging, as Optimus orders the Autobots to roll out, with this including Starscream, who is assigned to lead Bumblebee to the side of the space bridge, while he, RC, and Bulkhead prevent Megatron from stealing this last component. When the attack team are gone, the unlikely duo of Starscream and Bumblebee set out, using the coordinates the jetbot punched into the ground bridge controls to transport them into a cave network deep underground. Staying in his robot mode as his plane would be too fast for the yellow muscle car to keep up with, Starscream guides Bumblebee through the correct passages so that soon they arrive in a large cavern where several pieces of machinery have been laid out. As expected, these are the already acquired components for the space bridge, though this is not all the pair find, as down another passageway echoes the voice of an indeterminate number of Decepticons awaiting Megatron's arrival so they can begin work. While this is not bad enough, the sound of their metallic feet against the stone signifies they are getting closer, and so buzzing urgently, Bumblebee points at the nearest nearest component, a large spool of wire lying on the ground not far from Starscream's feet. Scowling deeply, the ex-Decepticon Lieutenant testily reminds his compatriot that he doesn't speak warble, though rolling his optics in a way that reminds Starscream of himself when dealing with particularly obtuse worker drones. The yellow bot hastily transforms into his vehicle mode and pops the trunk. While this does clarify matters, it does nothing to lessen Starscream's scowl, as he curses the Autobots for their insistence on using him as a gopher, though hearing the footsteps getting very loud now, he obeys, grabbing the wire and tossing it roughly into B's trunk before transforming as well and jetting back the way he came, just in time to avoid being spotted. When the pair are sure they aren't being followed, Starscream calls Ratchet, snapping at him to get them a ground bridge out of here, something the medic is more than capable of providing, so that a moment later, the away team find themselves back in the base, while Raph, Jack and Miko ask how it went. Transforming back to his robot form, Starscream boasts that thanks to his guidance and quick action, they were able to thwart the construction of the space bridge. Though cutting him off, Bumblebee warbles something that causes Ratchet to look at him and reply that presently, they are on board the Decepticon warship. Cutting over to Optimus and his crew, they have engaged in battle with Megatron and his forces like in canon. However, thanks to Raph not being injured since Bumblebee was on a mission, there was no need for RC to return to base, meaning that when Optimus and Bulkhead attempt to sneak aboard the warship, she is right there with them. Employing stealth protocols there in the heart of enemy territory, the trio make it to the cargo hold where Megatron had stashed the final piece of his space bridge, and unaware that Bumblebee already stole a piece to ensure the Decepticons could not complete their task, the trio gather up their prize and call for a ground bridge home. However, here we see a rather notable divergence from canon, as where normally Optimus would tell Bulkhead to go on alone, as following what they did to Raph, he has realized that Decepticons and Autobots can never coexist, and so he must kill Megatron. In this world, thanks to Starscream's defection, he is instead filled with a sense of hope that while he does not believe their new addition's motives are entirely pure, he at least made the choice to walk a different path, and if he can, then perhaps there is a future in which he and his old friend Megatronus are able to stand united as they once did. To this end, there is an air of celebration in Autobot Outpost Omega-1 as the team reunite and recount their adventures to one another. Naturally, still feeling more like a prisoner than a teammate, Starscream watches from the side, sneering slightly at the sickening camaraderie. That is until he feels Raph tapping his foot to get his attention. Looking down at the littlest human, Starscream demands to know what he wants. Though unperturbed by this rudeness, Raph replies that B told him everything the ex-con did down in the tunnels, so he wants to thank him for looking out for his partner. He then adds that he comes from a big family, and he's not that popular at school, so he knows what it's like to feel alone in a crowd. Though if Starscream actually tries to let the other Autobots in, maybe he'll find the same sense of connection that he has since coming here. It's at least worth a try. Truthfully, Starscream has no desire to find kinship with the Autobots any more than he did with the Decepticons, viewing them as just another pit stop on his way to his ambitions. Though, he does note that this is the first time someone has referred to him as one of the Autobots, not an ally, or someone who could one day become an Autobot. In that moment, Starscream isn't entirely sure how to feel, though he does know one thing. He feels disinclined to step on this particular human. Unfortunately, the mood of elation is not long-lasting, as Special Agent Fowler soon calls the base once again, this time to warn of a series of natural disasters, all centered around a volcano that began erupting purple lava and chunks of that dark energon stuff from a couple of months back. Trading that this must be the prophecy Optimus spoke of, the Autobots begin investigating, with Starscream as the most knowledgeable member of the team when it comes to the substance being questioned on any insight he may have as to why the blood of Unicron would be spewing from the Earth itself. Being entirely honest for once, Starscream confesses that he's just as clueless as the rest of them, though by using Agent Fowler's data on the earthquakes now shaking the planet, Ratchet is able to identify that these tremors are actually a Cybertronian heartbeat. In a tone of terror, Starscream asks if the Doctor is suggesting Unicron is the core of this world like Primus is for Cybertron, though it is Optimus who answers, stating that this is likely the case, though that makes their objective simple. They must find a way to prevent the Chaos Bringer from fully awakening, as that will surely bring about the doom written of in the prophecy. Though he doesn't say it, Starscream has a simple plan in mind: flee this world and leave the humans to their fate. Though before he can begin looking for an exit, Optimus instructs him to accompany him as he investigates one of the earthquake's epicenters, since his knowledge of dark energon will make him an asset in whatever is to come, a prospect the Jetbot finds unappealing to the extreme, as the last place he wishes to be is in the presence of the all-powerful and legendarily wrathful Unicron. In fact, Starscream is so opposed to the idea that when Prime looks at him, he outright refuses to come along, protesting that he agreed to join them, not to throw away his spark on a suicide mission for them. However, in that calming, sagely voice of his, Optimus replies that he knows, and it is for that reason that he is asking for Starscream's help. Since if they act now before Unicron can regain his strength, many lives including their own will be spared, compared to if they are forced to face him at his zenith. Begrudgingly, the former seeker admits that he hadn't considered that, his tone making it clear that while he is unhappy to be going on this mission, he will follow Prime's command, if only for the sake of his own survival. Together, the pair then make their way to a deserted canyon that not long ago had been the center of a ferocious earthquake. Through the comms, Ratchet requests they scan the area's metal composition, with the results proving his hypothesis correct, that the sites of the earthquakes do contain higher than usual natural metals, making them in essence the arms and legs of Unicron, and those tremors him stretching. Panic setting in now, Starscream suggests that if this is the case, then they had best get as far away from this place as possible, before the Chaosbringer uses this arm to crush them, though it seems it is too late for that, as suddenly, the face of Unicron himself emerges from the stone, declaring his intent to destroy the last disciple of Primus. Letting out a squawk of terror, Starscream takes this as his cue to leave, though before he can shift into a jet and leave Optimus in the dust, the sight falls his optics which freezes him in place with shock, the face of Unicron becoming an entire body of stone, which barrels down upon them with weapons raised. Leaping in to defend his stunned ally, Optimus clashes with the Cybertronian devil, though even so, his intent is not to kill, as he instead beseeches Unicron to listen to him. Curious at what a Prime would want of him, Unicron stops, allowing Optimus to implore him to halt his revival before he destroys humanity, who in many ways are the Chaosbringer's children. Unfortunately, it seems that Unicron does not see it this way, branding the species as parasites who he will purge himself of once he is dispatched this upstart heir of Primus. Then with malice in his purple eyes, he unleashes Dark Energon-empowered lightning upon Optimus. Such power is more than even a Prime can take, sending him crashing to the dirt, and in a moment of what Starscream can only conclude as madness, he bends down to sling one of Prime's arms over his shoulder, drawing their enemy's attention to him. In his cold voice, Unicron declares that those who stand with a Prime shall fall with them too. Or rather, he tries to, as the moment the deity opens his mouth, Starscream launches both of his missiles into it, not caring if it's honorable or not, since he wants to live. At such close range, this is enough to blow Unicron's head off, while his body crumbles to dust, causing Starscream to crow that not even the mighty Unicron is a match for him. However, such celebrations may be premature, as at once half a dozen Unicrons burst from the surrounding cliff faces to replace the one who just fell. Rising to their feet, Starscream and Optimus quickly realize they're surrounded, and with Prime holding onto him, Starscream cannot even fly away now. How typical. He has one moment of idiotic decency, and now he's going to die because of it. At least, that is what he thinks until Optimus begins opening fire with his blaster hands, downing another Unicron, and allowing them to begin hobbling back the way they came. Together, the pair are able to begin clearing a path as Optimus shoots while Starscream moves, all the while screaming down the comm for Ratchet to open the ground bridge at once. Though unfortunately, it seems escape might not be possible, as for every Unicron they destroy, more rise to take their place, until finally the pair are completely swarmed. Figuring he might as well put his last words to good use, Starscream prepares to spitefully tell Prime that he told him coming here was a bad idea, though before he can, the requested portal bursts to life, and out of it comes Bulkhead, Bumblebee, and RC, all of whom are raring to take the fight to Unicron. Thanks to the arrival of these fresh reinforcements, Starscream is able to reach the others and hand Optimus off to one of them, as RC makes the wise call to fall back to base, as with their leader being Unicron's target, they should prioritize getting him to safety. Having recovered enough to stand on his own by now, Optimus protests that Unicron will still be able to track him anywhere on this planet, so hiding will only slow their enemy down. The reasoning that if Optimus falls, so will the Earth, Ratchet is able to convince him to choose self-preservation just this once. However, due to their opponent being a mythical figure, nothing can be that easy, as when the Autobots escape the horde of Unicron avatars, they are simply confronted by a larger one, a colossal behemoth who towers over them the same way they do over the humans. Try though they might, the five fighters are no match for this incarnation of the Chaosbringer, with it only being through the fortuitous arrival of Megatron that they managed to survive. Naturally, the first appearance of his old master since his defection sends Starscream into a panic as he begins to tremble, somehow more afraid of him than he is of Unicron, though for now at least, the Decepticon leader pays him no mind, focusing instead on destroying this giant avatar, then turning his attention to Optimus. However, rather than seeking to destroy him as he normally would, Megatron reveals that he has come in search of an alliance, as only together can they vanquish their mutual enemy. Quizzically, Optimus asks how so, to which the gunmetal gladiator answers that thanks to having imbibed Dark Energon, he can lead the Autobots into the very core of the Chaosbringer's gargantuan body, to the place where he is most vulnerable, though once there, it will require the matrix of leadership which is currently housed inside Optimus's chest to actually defeat him. Recognizing the truth in Megatron's words, Optimus accepts these terms, though by the same token, he acknowledges that this alliance will be at best a temporary one, as he has no doubt that Megatron will attempt to betray him once the threat has passed, a claim the Decepticon leader makes no attempt to deny. Only now does he bother to address the other Autobots, and while for most he merely has a sneer, when his now purple eyes fall on Starscream, his lips curl, and he growls that he knew his first lieutenant was disloyal, but to have gone so far as to join the Autobots, this is a new low even for him. Instinctively, Starscream prepares to beg his former master's forgiveness, having been well trained to grovel when he hears that tone of voice, though strangely enough, before he can debase himself, his new allies come to his aid for the second time today, sneering that nothing's lower than being a con. Unfazed by this, Megatron merely smirks that it's quaint how quickly the Autobots have forgiven Starscream, though he has to wonder if they know all his past transgressions. Then, with that enigmatic statement, he reverts to his plane form and begins attacking another giant Unicron, giving the Autobots time to ground bridge home. However, this has been a temporary stopover, as Optimus makes the grave pronouncement that in order to reach the core, they will need to give Megatron access to the base, at least momentarily, so he can place the coordinates into the ground bridge. Naturally, no one is all that pleased with this decision, though Starscream's mind is a million miles away from the danger of allowing Megatron in, instead focusing on the threat he could pose if he were to make good on his illusion from earlier, as surely he was referencing the scrapping of Cliffjumper. Unfortunately, there is no way he can raise this protest without making it clear he has a secret he once kept after repeated warnings to come clean, and so biting his metallic tongue, he stands with the other Autobots as Megatron is brought into the base. Following a brief trading of barbs, Optimus excuses himself to speak privately with Jack, giving everyone a moment of respite, and mistaking Starscream's resumed trembling for fear of the upcoming fight with Unicron, RC approaches him and lays a hand on his shoulder plate, reassuring him that he did good today saving Optimus, that if he sticks close to the rest of them, he'll be fine. Forcing himself not to recoil from her hand as he imagines it closing around his throat, Starscream nods shakily to show that he's alright. Then, as the Autobot and Decepticon leaders form up, they make the joint call to roll out. Only now does the Jetbot realize that he is expected to accompany them into the heart of Unicron, having temporarily forgotten about the Chaos Bringer during the return of Megatron. Weakly, he tries to protest that he really ought to stay here and help Ratchet monitor comms in case they need a quick evacuation, an idea that Docbot seemingly agrees to, though as Starscream will unfortunately learn, this is a ploy to lower his guard, as when he isn't looking, Bulkhead accidentally shoves him through the ground bridge with a very unconvincing apology. At once, Starscream feels the eye of Unicron upon him, and so urges his allies to make haste, an order which is easier said than done, as with each step closer to the planet's core, the power of Dark Energon grows stronger, sapping the strength of everyone except Megatron, who is immune to its deleterious effects. Unfortunately, this is not the only issue the Autobot-Decepticon alliance face, as thanks to his connection with Unicron, Megatron informs them that the deity has deemed them a threat, and decided to purge them. No sooner does he say that, than hundreds of giant flying antibodies made of Dark Energon appear, and as they bear down upon the intruders, Optimus orders them to form up, while Megatron barks to continue pushing forward, as Unicron's spark chamber is not too far from here. Heeding both commands, the remaining Autobots form a tight circle as they begin blasting and swinging at any antibody that comes close, though it quickly becomes apparent they are fighting a losing battle, as like before, Unicron favors swarm tactics. Thankfully, here Starscream is able to provide some utility, transforming into his jet mode and taking flight. While at first the Autobots and Megatron assume that he is fleeing to save his own skin, this notion is dispelled when he begins engaging their enemies in the air, allowing for an easier thinning of the Unicron ranks as he can reach them where his allies cannot. However, this is not all he can do, as putting his experience as both the leader of the Seekers and later commander of the Decepticons to good use, he begins relaying tactical directions to the others with information only accessible from his bird's eye view of the battlefield. More than once, this proves the difference between life and death, as Starscream's honed survival instinct allows him to spot imminent threats before anyone else can, and either mow them down from above, or else transmit that intel to someone on the ground who can solve the problem. Thanks to this, the group are able to continue pushing forward, even managing to cross the bridge leading directly to Unicron's spark chamber, though here a problem arises, as when they reach the other side, they find the chamber door locked, making for a dead end with heavy emphasis on the dead considering there are still hundreds of antibodies bearing down upon them. However, this is where Megatron's contribution to the team comes into play, as by using the dark energy he has in his spark, he's able to fool the door into believing that he is part of the Chaos Bringer, and thus gaining passage for himself and Optimus. Looking back at his subordinates, Prime thanks them all for their bravery, before giving them one last order, to stay behind to hold the line, since he and Megatron will need all the time they can get to defeat Unicron. Loyally, RC, Bulkhead and Bumblebee all vow to do their best, ready to lay their lives down for their leader if required, and seeing that the choice is out of his hands, Starscream reverts to his robot mode and gives a petulant nod of his own. When Megatron and Optimus are gone, the remaining 4 fighters turn once more to face the incoming horde of antibodies, knowing that with their current position, the only option they have is to stand shoulder to shoulder and keep firing until they either take their enemy down or are overrun in the attempt. Huffing slightly, Starscream scowls that he never imagined he'd die like this. Though smirking, Bulkhead asks just how did he think he'd die, overlooking all of Cybertron while wearing a crown? Sardonically, the Decepticon defector replies that add a legion of admirers and that sounds perfect. Though having no time for jokes, RC snaps them to both focus, as Optimus is counting on them to buy him time. Ironically, it is this lapse in focus to chastise them that puts RC in danger, as a dark energon creature suddenly appears behind her, having flown up the side of the bridge to avoid detection. Recognizing the blue two-wheeler hasn't noticed this, and that in the time it'll take to warn her it'll be too late, Starscream does the only thing he can, firing a missile behind her and watching as the antibody explodes in a shower of purple. Spinning around to see the aftermath, RC in a somewhat shocked tone states that Starscream saved her, though keeping his aloof exterior, the Greybot simply replies that so he did, before returning his attention to the enemies closing in on them. By now, the corridor is full of the flying menaces, with it seeming that soon the defenders will be overwhelmed, though just as Starscream is about to give up hope, the antibodies begin falling from the sky en masse, having apparently gone inert. Looking between each other, the Autobots question if this means the battle's over, though wisely, RC suggests they better go check on Optimus, as they can only imagine what state he's in after directly confronting Unicron. Unfortunately, these words prove more prophetic than one might think, as when the group busts their way into the spark chamber, they see Megatron helping Optimus to his feet, a sinister smile on his face that Starscream knows all too well as the look of an evil plan exceeding expectations. Worriedly, Bulkhead asks Optimus if he's okay, though shockingly, the blue and red bot merely responds with confusion, not recognizing his name nor his subordinates when RC speaks to him next. At once, Starscream understands just what Megatron is thinking, though before he can cry for Prime to not listen to the Warlord, a grand bridge opens up, and Megatron urges Optimus to go through while he provides suppressing fire. To the horror of everyone, Prime obeys, and as the two make their escape, the remaining fighters all share a look of matching dismay. Not long after this, they are able to contact Ratchet and get their own grand bridge back to base, though it is a morose quartet who emerge. While the children all fuss over their Autobot guardians, the Docbot looks to Starscream, dread in his voice as he asks what became of Optimus, and meeting his eye, the defector replies that Optimus Prime is now in the clutches of the Decepticons. An air of despondence hangs over the Autobot base as the team reconvene, reflecting on what they have lost and planning how to recover him. In a small patch of good news, Starscream is at least able to assure his allies that Optimus is still alive, as Megatron will find far too much sadistic pleasure in exploiting his amnesia and putting him to work against the Autobots to simply kill him, meaning that so long as he proves useful, he will not be harmed. Gravely, Ratchet says the issue is what use that might be exactly, as even without his memories, Optimus is a formidable warrior, so it could be a problem if Megatron decides to deploy him onto the front lines, as none of them would wish to harm him while he would have no such compunctions. Alternatively, he might be probed for information on the Autobots, as even back when he was Orion Pax, Optimus was privy to a large amount of sensitive information as a clerk for the Iacon Hall of Records. This latter revelation puts an ugly scowl on Starscream's lips, as he muses that if Megatron knows this, they may be in greater trouble than they initially thought, as during the war, they, which is to say the Decepticons, stormed the Hall of Records and acquired a large cache of data, but they were never able to decipher it, making it largely worthless. However, if Prime or Pax or whatever is able to crack it, then Primus only knows what sort of information Megatron may now have at his disgusting fingertips. Gravely, RC replies that this is just further reason to rescue him as soon as possible, which means they need a plan, though cutting in, Starscream protests that this isn't all they need, as in Prime's absence, they need a leader, someone to make the calls so they don't descend into infighting, and considering he's the only one with command experience, having led the Decepticons in their leader's absence, he nominates himself. Unfortunately, rather than the enthusiastic endorsement he'd been hoping for, this is met with laughter from Bulkhead and the children, as Miko protests that he must be kidding, while Bulk claps him on the back, saying he appreciates the chance to laugh at a time like this. However, Ratchet, Bumblebee and RC are far less amused, with the two-wheeler not dignifying the suggestion with a response, while the Docbot patronizingly assures the new recruit that they're not Decepticons, and can operate fine without a designated commander, since they're all united by the common goal of getting Optimus back. Seeing that he's been outvoted, Starscream begrudgingly accepts accepts this, joining the conversation around how exactly they should reacquire their leader, and more importantly, what they should do with him once they have him, since it's almost certain Megatron is feeding him lies about them as they speak. Helpfully, Jack reveals the key to Vector Sigma Optimus entrusted him with before going off to fight Unicron, with this being just the pick-me-up the group need, as through that they may be able to reawaken the matrix of leadership and Optimus's lost memories, though to do so, they'd need to get to Cybertron. Thankfully, due to Starscream's influence, they already know about the space bridge, which Megatron has no doubt renewed construction on, a fact Agent Fowler confirms when he contacts the Autobots to inform them that the cons have struck the same military lab they did last time, evidently looking to reacquire the power source they wanted before everything with Unicron kicked off. Figuring Optimus may be there, RC takes Bulkhead, Bumblebee and Starscream, though to her dismay, it's just knockout, breakdown and a bunch of Vehicons, with the villainous pair jeering they can't believe Starscream really joined the enemy. They thought that was just a lie Lord Megatron told Pax to explain the Jetbot's absence. At the reference to Optimus, RC growls at the duo to tell her where he is now if they don't want to be scrapped. Though sardonic as ever, the not-so-good Doctor smirks that maybe he'll do it another time, as they've got what they came for, so it's time to go. At these words, a ground bridge opens up, which Knockout and Breakdown flee through, though still riled up, RC follows, breaking rank and transforming into a bike form so she can burst through the portal just before it closes. Obviously, the pair of villains are none too happy about this development, though surprisingly, it seems she is not here to make good on her threat, instead jetting past them as she looks around for where they might be keeping Optimus. Unfortunately, this hasty rescue attempt does not end in success, as when Megatron learns of the Autobot intruder, he deftly deploys Soundwave, who wordlessly ground bridges her into the Arctic, all the while Orion Pax remains blissfully unaware of his former ally's appearance as he keeps working in the next room over, decoding Project Iacon, just as Starscream had predicted. Back with the Autobots, they have returned to base feeling rather discouraged, having lost not only the battle but also RC. Though thankfully, it is not long before the latter reappears on their scanners, allowing them to bridge her home while she shakes snow from her chassis. As Ratchet examines her for damage from the sub-zero temperature, he is quick to throw in a scolding which Starscream is more than happy to join in on, feeling rather annoyed with the bike for abandoning them to deal with the Vehicons, while adding that her half-baked rescue attempt was utterly pointless and doomed from the start, since even if she found Prime, she had no means of escape, so all she would have accomplished is getting herself captured or killed. Venomously, RC retorts that at least she tried something, but letting out a low growl of frustration, Starscream shoots back that action for action's sake isn't nobility, it's stupidity, earning him a scowl as she asks what he knows of nobility anyway. He's a self-serving coward. For a moment, silence hangs between them as the pair of bots glare at each other, then with a swish of his wings as he turns his back on her, Starscream sneers that she may call him what she likes, though at their current rate, he'll outlive them all when their nobility has bought them an early trip to the scrap heap. Wanting to put an end to the fighting, Jack uses this pause to speak up, yelling for both RC and Starscream to look at the positive of what just happened. The Decepticons just got the power source for their space bridge, which means it must be close to completion, at which point they can commandeer it for their trip to Cybertron. Begrudgingly, RC admits this is a good point, while Starscream grins that he may have underestimated this human, since allowing the enemy to think they've won only to use their own creation against them is the sort of ingenuity that would place him in good standing with the Decepticons. While meant as a compliment, this garners the opposite reaction, as Jack tells the Greybot not to make him sick, having evidently taken RC's side in regard to their recent argument. Nonetheless, it cannot be denied that having a plan does wonders for morale, so while RC and Starscream are still not speaking to one another, they do at least have enough professionalism to do their part for the plan. Figuring that a small strike team will be best as to not draw attention, it is decided that RC, Bulkhead and Bumblebee will attack the space bridge site together, with the latter pair holding it while Jack and RC go ahead to Cybertron in search of Vector Sigma. Meanwhile, Raph, Ratchet and Starscream will focus on locating and reacquiring Optimus, so they can give him his memories back immediately upon the away team's return. Confidently, the Jetbot claims that this should be child's play, so he will simply use his access code to bypass the warship's cloak, since all Seekers have one to ensure they can find their way back to base after missions considering it's constantly on the move. Unfortunately, nothing can be so easy, so when he enters the code into Ratchet's sensors, he finds that the frequency has been changed, no doubt Soundwave's doing specifically to thwart him. This will make matters more challenging, though not impossible, as they'll just have to come at this from a different angle. As it turns out, Raph has an angle in mind, though not one Starscream much likes, as it require him to do all the legwork, or in this case, wing work, as the boy suggests that as the only Autobot capable of flight, he simply fly around until he finds the warship, as while he may not have scanners that can detect it anymore, he does have optics, so sooner or later he's bound to run into it. Hoping the human doesn't mean this literally, Starscream reluctantly sets to work, transforming into a jet and beginning his journey west, since with every direction being equally viable, he figures he might as well race the sun across the sky for something to break up the tedium. The one benefit of this assignment is that he is provided with all the energy he can consume, as he'll need it for the long-haul flight. With this proving correct, as after a solid day of flying, he is still no closer to the warship than when he departed. Briefly, he considers finding a deserted island to land on and power down, since no one could begrudge him a little rest. Though, as luck would have it, bad luck most likely, this is when he spots a squadron of Vehicons patrolling the skies, and if they're here, then the warship must be nearby. This is just perfect, since now instead of locating his target from a distance, he'll have to tell the Vehicons until he catches sight of the ship, and at pretty close range too, so he can mask his energy signature with one of theirs in case Soundwave is watching, which he almost certainly is. And here he thought he couldn't hate that mute cretin more when they're on the same side, though he is rapidly proving himself an even more vexing enemy than he was an ally. Nonetheless, knowing what he must do, Starscream falls in formation with the Vehicons, shadowing the rearguard in a way that will not allow him to his presence, since if there's one thing he's good at, it's being sneaky. Well, actually, he's very good at two things. That, and making schemes that blow up in his face. Case in point, by the time Starscream establishes visual contact with the warship, he is already within sensor range, which poses a very real problem, as now if he were to disengage from the Vehicon patrol, his presence would become immediately apparent to the Decepticons, and they would in all likelihood open fire on him, turning him into molten slag before he could even say the words evasive maneuvers. No, he's got to ride this one out, all the way to the warship. Then, once he's found a good place to hide, he can formulate a new plan to get away. Touching down the landing pad, Starscream is once again amazed by the stupidity of Vehicons, as despite him standing mere feet behind them, not a single one thinks to look back, instead heading inside with him hot on their heels. Knowing that not everyone on board is as much of an idiot, the Decepticon deserter hastily heads for an abandoned side room near Energon's storage, since while the Energon is heavily guarded, no one ever pays any mind to the out-of-the-way storeroom. Skulking through the corridors as stealthily as a 30-foot robot can, Starscream quickly hurls himself through the door of the storeroom, though for once it is not abandoned, as when he turns to face the newly installed glowing consoles, he sees Prime staring back at him with a look of utter shock. For a moment, Starscream thinks that this is proof that the Autobot leader has recovered his memories, only to recall at the last moment what Knockout said back at the military lab, and so hastily covers Optimus's mouth before he can call for help. In a low voice, the Jetbot states that he can only imagine what Tells Megatron has told him, so while he does not expect Prime to believe him, he does expect him to listen. And to think. Does nothing about this situation strike him as strange? Is the fact that he presumably cannot remember his time on Earth prior to awakening in its core not odd? And does he not wonder why his so-called enemies treated him with concern rather than enmity before he and Megatron fled? Stepping back a little, Orion mutters that he does not have answers to any of those questions, and seeing his chance, Starscream leers that he does. He is not Orion Pax as he believes, but instead, Optimus. Suddenly, the door to Orion's lab bursts open as a group of Vehicons enter, all demanding Starscream's surrender. Seeing that his time on the ship's at an end, and not so foolish as to attempt a doomed rescue like RC, the defector chooses to save his own skin, transforming into a jet again, and flying as fast as he can to the exit. Senses be damned. Naturally, this is met with opposition as every Decepticon on board makes it their personal mission to shoot him out of the sky, though thanks to a bit of creative flying and more than a little luck, he escapes with only minor injuries, though he is forced to make a crash landing into Coal Ratchet so he can fire up the ground bridge and prep a repair kit. Nevertheless, when Starscream returns, it is the closest thing to a hero's welcome he's ever likely to receive, as not only did he find the warship, but to hear him tell it, he risked life and servo to deliver a covert message to Optimus. While it is a little hard to believe that he would willingly put himself in harm's way for the good of others, it cannot be denied that he went above and beyond in his mission, and for that he deserves praise. Meanwhile, back on the Decepticon warship, another of Starscream's hard-to-believe tales is taking root, this time in the mind of Orion Pax, as in spite of the Jetbot being a known traitor, there is an odd ring of truth to his words that has ignited the clerk's curiosity. Remembering how the Autobots had called him Optimus, and the deceased enemy commander had been called Optimus Prime, Orion starts his search there. As he reads the reports, he finds himself sympathizing with his bot and his cause, as it is far from the tyranny Lord Megatron had told him about, and when he looks more closely at the image of Prime, he discovers discrepancies that could only exist if it was doctored. Making use of his hacking skills, Orion is quickly able to remove the alterations, and as he stares up at the face of Optimus Prime, he is shocked to see that it is his own. Unfortunately, it seems that Orion's sleuthing has not gone unnoticed, as before he can make an attempt to escape, he is confronted by Megatron, who informs his clerk that if he will not work willingly, then he will do so under threat of pain, but either way, he will decode those files for him. As a result, Orion soon finds himself with two Vehicon guards, while Megatron departs for the site of the space bridge, as he has reason to believe the Autobots are using it in a desperate attempt to revive their lost leader. As he suspected, the Autobots are waiting for him when he arrives, not just Bulkhead and Bumblebee, but Starscream and Ratchet too, as now they have the warship's location, their main priority is to defend the space bridge for as long as it takes for Jack and RC to return. However, this is easier said than done when the one who wishes to stop them is Megatron, as despite outnumbering him 4-1, that one is a seasoned gladiator and a warrior who revels in combat, meaning that he is more than capable of defeating them all with relative ease. The only positive, if it can be called that, and for Starscream it most certainly can't, is that Megatron's desire to punish his disloyal former second-in-command outweighs his sense of urgency in stopping Jack and RC, so instead of waiting by the space bridge, he is pummeling the jetbot when Orion emerges through the ground bridge, having inadvertently defeated his captors. This side of sadism and brutality is the last straw the wavering clerk needs to convince him that Starscream was telling the truth, so that when he enters the fray, it is on the side of the Autobots. Sadly, as much of his combat experience is lost along with his memories, Orion is not strong enough to defeat Megatron on his own, though his valiant effort does buy the away team time to return, so that while RC and a wounded Starscream occupy Megatron, Jack is able to present Orion with the data he acquired from Vector Sigma, thus restoring the Matrix of Leadership and transforming him into Optimus Prime once again. In an instant, the tide of battle turns, as with Optimus back in his right mind, he is at last able to stand equal to his nemesis, and with loyal allies by his side, they succeed in beating Megatron back until Raph and the other humans can summon them a ground bridge to make their escape. What follows is a celebration the likes of which have not been seen since the golden age of Cybertron, as everyone is overjoyed to have Optimus back. Even Starscream cannot help but be pleased, if only because he knows he has helped make Megatron's life just a little bit harder, and so he does partake to some degree in the celebration. Eventually, the party begins to wind down, as the humans need sleep and the Autobots could use some rest too after the battle they just fought. As this happens, Starscream finds himself alone with RC, which, considering their last exchange, is rather awkward. Though, to his surprise, the Blue Bike takes this opportunity to apologize, stating that she treated him unfairly before and was using him as an excuse to take out her anger. With a slight roll of the optics, the jetbot glibly assures her not to worry about it, as he's more than used to being a punching bag. Though brushing this aside, she insists that she truly is sorry. She was just a bit raw since the loss of Optimus reminded her of the recent loss of her partner Cliffjumper. Remembering their discussion from the day he defected, Starscream nonchalantly confirms that it was Arachnid who terminated him, wasn't it? Though, shaking her head, RC clarifies that the spider killed her first partner back on Cybertron, a bot named Tailgate, but she's yet to find out which con it was who scrapped Cliff. However, she does know one thing. When she does find out who did it, she's going to make them wish they never emerged from the well of all sparks. Then, slowly, her eyes fall upon Starscream, and as she says his name, he struggles to suppress a gulp, as he casually asks what she wants. Gaze still fixed on him, RC comments that he was on the warship when Cliff died, wasn't he? To which the defector somewhat nervously replies that he was, before questioning why she wants to know. For a moment, the two-wheeler says nothing, and Starscream is certain she's about to accuse him of the murder, only for her expression to soften, as she instead asks if he knows who did it, her tone almost pleading since this is something that has weighed heavily on her for a while now. Though as a Cybertronian he does not need to breathe, Starscream inhales deeply here. Then, as he looks her squarely in the optics, he replies that he's sorry, but he has no idea. Shoulders slumping in disappointment, RC sighs that it's fine, and that it was a long shot anyway, though if he remembers anything she hopes he'll tell her. Nodding his head sympathetically, though not actually making any comment to the affirmative, Starscream urges RC to power down for a while, since she literally travelled between galaxies today, and figuring that she could use some rest, the Blue Bike bids him goodnight, before thanking him for his help once again. In the aftermath of Prime's return, life becomes much like it was before the emergence of Unicron, though there is one key difference. As having truly proven himself a member of the team, Starscream is formally recognized as an Autobot, with the insignia on his chest being changed from the Decepticon logo to their one shortly after Optimus has the same done to the pair on his shoulders. As a result of this, he is finally granted free roam of the planet without escort, a welcome change of pace after being cooped up in the base for so long and only let out when others want him to do something insanely risky. To this end, he decides to stretch his wings for a bit while Prime and the others are chasing after some ancient Cybertronian beacon, though when Bulkhead contacts him to request he meet Bumblebee at the site of a second beacon since he's the closest to the scout's location, he begrudgingly accepts. Due to being able to travel at the speed of sound, Starscream reaches the coordinates long before Bulkhead, though by the time he arrives, Bumblebee has already been incapacitated by a group of humans who evidently set the beacon as a trap. Recognizing them as those filthy scavengers from Mech due to his part in rescuing Breakdown, Starscream has no question about their intentions, nor does he have any compunctions regarding what he is about to do. As transforming back into his robot mode from the safety of a nearby cliff, he opens fire upon them with both of his missiles. While this is ostensibly meant to scare them off, as he knows Prime would would harp on for megacycles if he started intentionally killing humans, Starscream is not so naive as to believe that none will die in the explosion and rock slides that follow. Not that he cares, honestly, since those who survive will surely flee back into their fetid little holes, and not trouble them again for a long time, if ever again. Thanks to this intervention, when Bumblebee awakens, it is with his T-Cog still in his body. In a comforting tone, the Greybot explains that his comrade fell into a mech trap, though fortunately he was able to, drive them off, an act Bulkhead expresses gratitude for when he arrives a few minutes later. As a result of this, the events that follow play out far smoother than in canon, as with his T-Cog intact, Bumblebee is able to stop Knockout from stealing the shield generator, which in turn means the villainous Doctor is defenseless during his next clash with the Autobots, this time over the fabled forge of Soulless Prime. However, this is not the only advantage the heroes have in this battle, as due to Bumblebee not being benched, he is also present, giving the Autobots an even greater edge, so that Knockout and Breakdown flee long before Megatron can come to their rescue, leaving the forge in the hands of the Autobots, and specifically, a Prime, where it belongs. And with that, the initial relic hunt comes to a close, seeing the Autobots come out on top with all 3 relics in their possession, as Bumblebee was essential in acquiring both the spark extractor and shield generator, as well as helping to get the forge. He receives a special commendation from Optimus, while the other Autobots gather round. Naturally, Raph is over the moon, suggesting they go racing to celebrate, while Bulkhead, RC, and Ratchet give their congratulations. As for Starscream, he has been entrusted with putting the relics in storage, an act of trust on Optimus's part that in his usual aggrieved way the Jetbot mistakes for grunt work. All the same, he carries out his task, storing each icon relic while imagining what he could do with their power, though that is for another day. As for now, like him, they can lie in wait. However, one thing that most certainly cannot wait is an urgent call the Autobots receive from Agent Fowler a few days later, as he informs them that a pair of Cybertronians have been seen scrapping outside Omaha. As all their members are present and accounted for, the Autobots initially assume that this must be Decepticon infighting, though upon seeing a video feed, all let out knowing groans. For most of the team, this is because they have recognized Wheeljack, with it being typical that he would cause a ruckus, though in Starscream's case, his groan is related to the other combatant, Dreadwing, the twin of that oaf Skyquake, as not only will his presence mean that Megatron has gained a powerful new servant, but if he knows the big brute, he's here for one reason and one reason alone. To rip Starscream's spark from his chest and feed it to him for the desecration of his brother's corpse. Obviously liking his spark just where it is, the Decepticon deserter is rather reluctant to join the away team for this mission, though insisting that Dreadwing is a dangerous foe and thus they will need every fighter they can get, Prime dragoons him into going anyway. Hanging back in the hopes that Dreadwing will not see him, Starscream watches as the others engage the big brute, forcing him to flee while Wheeljack in a vain attempt to stop him blows up a nearby gas station. Not a very Autobot-y move, he must say, though it is at this point that he remembers Wheeljack's a wrecker. Oh joy. Evidently, this feeling is mutual, as when Wheeljack catches sight of the newest Autobot, he initially tries to blast him, causing Starscream to leap back with a shriek until Bulkhead forces his old friend to stand down, revealing that he's one of them now. Coldly, Wheeljack retorts they must be desperate if they're letting in bottom-feeding scraplets like Screamy, though when Prime firmly orders them all to withdraw, he reluctantly sheathes his weapons. All the same, even when they return to base to debrief, Wheeljack's optics never leave Starscream, as if waiting for him to do something evil so he can scrap him. However, for once it is Starscream whose goals most closely align with the Autobot cause, as like the others, he wants Dreadwing found and stopped as quickly as possible, whereas Wheeljack is too busy chafing under Optimus's command to care about anyone but himself. As a result, the events of Loose Cannons more or less play out like in canon, since if anything, Wheeljack has more reason to doubt Optimus's leadership and thus go off on his own, allowing Bulkhead to be captured and forcing Prime to come to the rescue. This in turn forces Optimus and Wheeljack to bury the hatchet for the sake of their mutual comrade, though sadly, the same cannot be said for Wheeljack and Starscream, as when Jackie prepares to leave, he warns the Jetbot in no uncertain terms that he'll be sure to pop in from time to time, to make sure Scream is on his best behavior. Following this, the Autobots experience something of a calm patch, as due to Starscream being with them and subsequently not needing to scavenge for Energon, he does not come across the recently defected Arachnid in her Insecticon servant, meaning the Autobots remain completely unaware of her scheme. Nonetheless, Arachnid does still attempt her coup, sending a challenge to Megatron and sicking her monster upon him when he arrives. Unfortunately for her, like in canon, the former gladiator is able to overcome the Insecticon, and so turns his wrath on his disloyal former subordinate who rather wisely attempts to flee for her life. However, due to the lack of Autobot interference, this is dreadfully unsuccessful, so when Dreadwing and his platoon arrive, they are able to surround and apprehend Arachnid. Briefly, Megatron considers executing her then and there, as it would be a fitting end for the traitor, though it would also be a quick quicker death than she deserves, and so allowing his cruelty to override his pragmatism once again, he commands his forces to bring Arachnid back to the ship, as while she will be executed for her crimes, he's going to let Knockout play with her for a while first. Returning to the Autobots and their break from trouble, there is no Nemesis Prime incident due to Mech's collapse at the hands of Starscream several weeks back, meaning the first event of note comes when Bulkhead discovers an Energon pickup site while out on patrol. Going to investigate, the bulky bot unfortunately finds himself out of his element, as while climbing down to the pit the Energon cubes have been stored in, he falls and rather embarrassingly knocks himself out. A while later he awakens, and to his shock finds himself aboard the Decepticon warship, having seemingly remained unnoticed. Wisely, his first instinct is to call for backup, though finding his comms either broken or jammed, he decides to proceed stealthily on foot in search for a comm unit he can use to call Optimus and the others. Due to the absence of an armada of Starscream clones, he is actually able to achieve this objective without incident, though as luck tends to do, it quickly runs out, as when Bulkhead attempts to use the comm unit, he instead sets off a homing beacon alerting everyone both on and off the ship to his presence. Here the absence of Starscream clones proves an active detriment, as without them to draw the attention of the Vehicons, Bulkhead is soon surrounded and captured, though it seems his capture is not a total loss, as back at base, Starscream picks up the homing beacon on his Decepticon scanners. Seems Soundwave wasn't as thorough as he should have been at locking him out. That mistake will cost him. Assembling the team, Starscream relays the information he's received, with it not taking long to put it together with Bulkhead's continual comm silence as an SOS from their friend. To this end, Optimus declares they must undertake a rescue mission, stating that he and Bumblebee will head for the comm unit Bulkhead used to contact them in case he is still nearby, while RC and Starscream will make for the brig, since there is a very real possibility Bulkhead has already been captured after setting off that alarm. Recognizing this as the more dangerous job, Starscream demands to know why him, to which Ratchet smirks that obviously he and RC have been chosen because they've both already attempted daring rescues from within the Decepticon warship. That is unless Starscream was lying about his part in turning Orion back into Optimus. Seeing that he's found himself caught between a rock and a hard place, the Jetbot growls that no, of course, the Doctor is right. It makes sense to assign this task to the seasoned rescuers. Following this, the team of Starscream, RC, Bumblebee and Prime step through the ground bridge and onto the warship, though due to the beacon being interfered with by the ship's cloak, the best Ratchet can do is pull them into a random hallway. Nonetheless, knowing what they must do, Starscream points Prime and B in the direction of the relay, before telling RC to come with him, and he'll show her where the brig is. Then, as speed is of the essence, the pair shift into their vehicle forms and set off. Meanwhile, preferring the versatility of their bot modes, Optimus and Bumblebee proceed on foot, hugging the walls of corridors and using B's skill as a scout to avoid detection as they make their way towards their objective. However, it seems that fate has other ideas, as when the pair are forced to duck into a side room to avoid being spotted by an unexpected Vehicon patrol, they find themselves in what appears to be a lab, with this giving Optimus an idea. While he does not remember his time as Orion Pax clearly, he is aware from what Starscream had told him that he was responsible for decoding the location of all the Iacon relics the Decepticons had on file. Now those same files are at his fingertips once again, and so pulling out a transfer drive, begins copying them while instructing Bumblebee to stand guard, since while he recognizes this is quite a risk, it is also the best chance they have to acquire and safeguard the remaining relics from Megatron. Meanwhile, back with Starscream and RC, having made use of the Defector's intimate knowledge of the layout and patrol schedules of the ship, they have managed to reach the brig unnoticed, so that now all that remains is to search the cells. Splitting up so they may cover more ground, the pair, now back in their robot configurations, begin going door to door. As this is a warship designed to hold hundreds of Autobot POWs, this is not a brisk task, though as RC opens a particular door, a gasp escapes her lips that causes Starscream to look over. At once the reason becomes clear, as suspended in energy shackles is a rather battered looking Arachnid. Despite her pitiable state, the spider remains snarky as ever, jeering that she didn't expect to see RC here. Has she come to bust her out, or is she finally going to make good on those threats to scrap her? Hate filling her optics and tone as she shapes her hand into a blaster, RC growls that she should, since it's fitting she died the same way Tailgate did. A sentiment Starscream quite agrees with as he approaches with a sinister smirk on his face. Only now does Arachnid's expression become one of shock, as she demands to know what he's doing here, to which the Jetbot sneers that he's an Autobot now. Can't she tell? And it's all thanks to her, since if she didn't abandon him during their mission together, he never would have found his true place. So for that he really should thank her, perhaps with a quick death. Seeing that he means it, Arachnid begins thrashing in her bindings, with this giving RC pause as she muses their enemies bound and unarmed. So is it really right to scrap her like this? Seeing her conviction wavering, Starscream leans in close, and in a low voice reminds his ally that so was Tailgate, and that didn't stop Arachnid, did it? At once, all sense of doubt leaves RC's face, and as she raises her blaster arm high, Arachnid goes to scream. Though before she can make a noise, it is already too late, as a single shot through the spark ends her existence. The silence that follows the deed is deafening, with it taking RC's slightly shaky voice to break it, as she declares that she shouldn't have done that. Optimus would never have approved. Though struggling to keep the smile from his face, Starscream assures her that what she did was right, was justice. Arachnid was a monster who caused countless beings to suffer, and would do so again if given the chance. She prevented that, and so she has nothing to feel remorse for. Meeting his optics, RC asks if he truly means that, and nodding seriously, he replies that he does, before urging her to come along, as they still have to find Bulkhead. Returning to Optimus and Bumblebee, they have at last completed the data transfer, though it seems they are not in the clear yet, as when the Autobot leader removes the drive, alarms begin blaring throughout the ship. At that moment, several Vehicons burst through the door to the lab, forcing the pair to fight their way out, though evidently this is only the start of their problems, as more of the drones are incoming, and at their head is none other than Megatron. Recognizing they cannot defeat such a force on their own, Optimus commands his subordinate to run while he lays down suppressing fire, though as expected, this does little more than buy them a small head start, as Megatron commands his forces to scrap the scout and bring him Prime alive. Meanwhile, in the brig, the same alarms have begun sounding, though thankfully RC and Starscream have found Bulkhead, with it being a simple matter to shoot his shackles. Unfortunately, what is far trickier is carrying him, as it seems Bulk didn't go down without a fight, meaning it's the limping trio who begin heading back the way they came, with Starscream having flashbacks to his and Prime's fight with Unicron, as like then, he's carrying a big lug while screaming down the comm for Ratchet to make a ground bridge for the love of Primus. Fortunately, it seems that Starscream's comms are not affected by the same blackout as Bulkhead's, meaning the Docbot receives this rather rude message loud and clear, as he sternly tells him and RC to rendezvous with Optimus and Bumblebee at their entrance point, since he will have a portal waiting for them. By now, the trio have drawn the attention of their own group of Vehicons, so that when they round the corner of the corridor they arrived in, they are dismayed to see a larger horde led by Megatron coming at them from the opposite direction. Urgently, Starscream yells for everyone to move now. Then, as the green ground bridge portal opens, he, RC, Bulkhead, Bumblebee, and Prime leap through, narrowly avoiding the grasp of their converging enemies by inches. Landing in a heap, the members of Team Prime then let out a collective exhale, relieved to have made it off the warship in one piece. Not only that, but Optimus is quick to reveal that they now possess the data of Project Iacon, meaning that once he's decrypted it, they'll be able to begin collecting the remaining relics. He then turns his attention to Bulkhead, smiling that he's glad the ex-wrecker is okay, to which Bulk grins the O's at all to RC and Screamy, a sentiment Optimus seconds as he looks to them to ask how their mission went. Briefly, RC considers confessing what she did, as in spite of Starscream's words, a part of her remains unsure whether Arachnid's fate was just or not. However, in that moment of uncertainty, Starscream speaks up, blithely stating that up until the end it was a run-of-the-mill infiltration. They got in, they found Bulkhead, and they got out, with the only notable occurrence being the Vehicons swarm at the end. As he says this, RC looks up into her leader's optics, finding a good and noble bot, whose example she has long done her best to follow, and whose respect means the world to her. Though, all the same, when Starscream finishes his lie and falls silent, she does not contradict him. Several days have passed since the daring heist aboard the Decepticon warship, which not only allowed them to rescue the captured Bulkhead, but also acquire the complete list of encrypted Project Iacon files. In that time, Optimus has been hard at work decrypting these so that he and his team can recover the relics before the Decepticons can get their sinister servos on them. Meanwhile, for the most part, the other Autobots have been left to their own devices, which in RC's case is the worst thing that could happen, as without the pressing urgency of action and combat, she has no choice but to dwell on what she did while aboard the warship. Though she does not regret that Arachnid is dead, far from it, she cannot help but feel disquieted by the way she died, and the ease with which she, RC, was able to blast a helpless prisoner. Not only that, but in spite of reminding herself of everything awful Arachnid did, especially to Tailgate, the sense of satisfaction, of closure she'd been waiting for never comes, leaving only doubt in its place. Not wanting to burden her friends with this, she begins confiding in Starscream, with the Jetbot appearing remarkably sympathetic, as he assures her that such acts are never pleasant, but they are necessary, especially in war. before, but there is no point in dwelling on them, as such baggage only weighs one down. In truth, the only actions Starscream has ever regretted are the ones that have brought harm or embarrassment down on himself, but he knows better than to say any of this, having become quite adept at holding his tongue since joining the Autobots, and so continues playing the role of contrite confidant until Prime summons the team to attend him, as he has an announcement. Gathering around the base's central console, the Autobots bear witness to a set of 4 coordinates, all on disparate parts of the globe, with Prime explaining that these are the first set of Cybertronian relics he has managed to uncover. For the sake of efficiency, they will all split into teams of 2 and retrieve the relic simultaneously, as that way the Decepticons will hopefully not learn about their activities until it is too late. We need to keep an optic on RC and ensure she doesn't crack under the weight of her troublesome guilt. Starscream volunteers to partner with her, as they've proven to be effective together, though here Prime refuses him, stating that RC's relic is buried underground in something called a subway, a nest of human-sized tunnels which he will be unable to maneuver in effectively, so RC will be partnered with Bumblebee, while Starscream's highest and best use will be to accompany Bulkhead. Speaking up, now Ratchet surmises that this means he and Optimus will make up the final team, though shaking his head, the red and blue leader replies that he will be heading to Antarctica alone, while Ratchet will be working with Wheeljack, since pairing him with a seasoned warrior will allow the duo to compensate for each other's weaknesses. Though clearly unhappy with this, the Doctor stoically accepts his leader's commands, and so when the entirety of Team Prime is assembled, they begin heading through the ground bridge in waves, while Raph and Agent Fowler wish them luck as the ones staying behind to monitor comms and work the ground bridge. First off the rank are RC and Bumblebee, accompanied by Jack and Miko as they arrive in New York City and begin making their way down into the subway. Unfortunately for them, this is not going to be the milk run they had hoped for, as while the Decepticon warship never gained sentience and used that to decrypt the coordinates for the cons, they do have one advantage in this timeline that they did not in canon. It took longer for Starscream to arrive and cause Orion Pax to doubt Megatron, meaning he had more time to work on Project Iacon, thus giving Soundwave a more completed version of the puzzle to finish. As a result, the Decepticons now also have the location of the initial 4 relics, and so Knockout is assigned to retrieve the New York one, this time with some Vehicons as Breakdown is deceased and the Insecticons never awoke and joined Megatron. For the most part, the initial stretch of this mission therefore goes as canon, right up until RC and Bumblebee stumble upon the Decepticon mining operation, as with no big nasty bug to get the jump on them, they instead succeed in ambushing Knockout and his small contingent of miners, forcing them to surrender. Figuring they might as well make use of what the cons started, Bumblebee descends into the hole to retrieve the relic, while RC shepherds their prisoners to one side, where she holds them at blaster point. Naturally, Knockout uses this opportunity to complain, though RC is mostly able to tune this out. That is, until he mentions Arachnid. In actuality, what he had been saying is the spider's drilling ability would have made this tedious task easy, though RC does not hear that. All she hears is the name of her nemesis and freezes. It is only a momentary lapse in focus, but that is all it takes for someone as sly and shrewd as Knockout to notice, with him capitalizing by leaping into the air and assuming his vehicle mode, though when he strikes her chest, she is knocked onto her back, allowing the Vehicons to point their blaster arms at her, turning the tables. Subsequently, when Bumblebee emerges a minute later, it is to a smirking Doctor, who orders him to hand over the relic or the two-wheeler gets it. Defiantly, RC orders B to take the kids and run, but being too much of a sweetheart to ever abandon a comrade, the scout lets out a defeated buzz, then offers Knockout the object, a strange disc of indeterminate function. Cackling gleefully, the glossy red racer gloats that it was a pleasure doing business with them. Then, transforming once more, he and his cohort set off. Rushing over to her, Jack, Miko and B all ask if RC is okay, though scowling, she replies that she's not. She let herself be distracted, and now the cons have the relic. Perceptively, Jack questions how that happened as she's usually so focused, but these last few days she's been distant, even with him, causing the bike to say that she's just been working through some stuff, though now's not the time, as they need to catch up to Knockout. Transforming now too, RC and Bumblebee along with their human passengers give chase, using Miko's knowledge of subway systems and, shall we say, lax view on obeying signs, to create a shortcut for themselves that allows them to come alongside Knockout. Wanting to prove his utility, Jack tells his allies that he'll get the relic, in an act of bravery and minor stupidity, pulls off his helmet and hurls it through Knockout's passenger side window. Naturally, this incenses the vain Decepticon Doctor, though this is not the end. Far from it, as when RC veers in as close as she can without crushing Jack's leg against Knockout's door, the boy leans in and snatches the mystery disc right off his dashboard. Almost blind with rage now, Knockout takes this chance to transform, forcing Jack to hastily pull his hand back or else risk losing it. And speaking of losing it, that is precisely what Knockout is doing, as he thrusts a hand forward to crush boy and bike alike, only for his arm to pass right through his enemies. Sharing the Decepticon medic's confusion, RC and Jack realize that in the scramble to pull away, the relic latched onto the boy's wrist, with its effect revealing that it must be a phase shifter. Now knowing what it is, as well as what it can do, the game becomes much simpler, as while B and Miko break off to make their way back to the surface, Jack and RC lead Knockout deeper in. Then, when they're certain he won't be able to find his way out after them, they drive headlong into a solid wall and ascend back to the surface. Coming out in an isolated alley, the two partners then make some calls, first to Bumblebee to rendezvous, and then to Raph, as it's time to go home. Autobots 1, Decepticons 0. Meanwhile, down at the bottom of the world, Optimus has encountered an opponent of his own, this being Dreadwing, as they both arrive at the coordinates at the same time, only to discover the artifact has been dug up. Recognizing they're on the same trail and only one can claim the prize, this inevitably results in a clash, though like in canon, Optimus emerges victorious, burying Dreadwing under a pile of snow and offering his Viacon aides a chance to retreat, one they don't take, and so are regrettably scrapped when they attempt to go toe-to-toe with a Prime. Contacting Raph and Agent Fowler, Optimus then questions if there are any nearby human installations, with the pair informing him of a military base which is the most logical place for the uncovered relic to now be located. Using his standing as a special agent, Fowler is then quickly able to evacuate the place, giving Optimus a clear run, though unfortunately when he attempts to depart with his artifact, Dreadwing appears, ready for round 2. Having a great deal of respect for the Honourable Decepticon, Optimus does not want to fight him, even suggesting he defect as their goals are more closely aligned than the bulky jet fighter might believe. However, being far too loyal to the cause and his master to ever entertain the notion of deserting, Dreadwing flatly refuses, forcing the pair to do battle once again. Unfortunately for Optimus, this terrain does not favour him, as not only does it lack snow he can drop on his opponent, but also, unlike Dreadwing, he does not want to damage the base, meaning he must split his attention while trying to draw his foe away. As a result of this, Dreadwing is able to wrest control of the relic from Optimus, before bluntly informing him that he is lucky things ended this way, as while he would not hesitate to strike Prime down, his hatred for Autobots is less than his devotion to Lord Megatron, so he will withdraw for now, and scrap Optimus another day. Making good on these words, Dreadwing then takes flight, forcing Optimus to call in a ground bridge as he contemplates his failure. Next up is Ratchet and Wheeljack's mission, which for better or worse goes exactly like canon save for one important detail. Rather than creating a virus that transfers the Project Iacon database to the Autobots as they already have it, the virus instead gives them a backdoor through the warship's cloak, meaning they can always track its location, a helpful new addition in case any of their allies are captured again, even if it does come at the cost of Soundwave escaping with the Resonance Blaster. Finally, we turn our attention to Starscream and Bulkhead's mission, which more than any other is affected by the changes in this timeline, specifically the lack of Insecticons, as without Hardshot to challenge them, the duo have no trouble scrapping the paltry force of Viacons Megatron sends and reaching their relic unopposed. However, as they will soon learn, their prize is a poison pill, rather literally, as is a chunk of toxic energon, or Tox-N, which was evidently sent to Earth due to the threat it poses. Being more than familiar with the bioweapon Megatron concocted out of this stuff during the war, Bulkhead is adamant that they must destroy it, since even sealing it in the base would be too dangerous considering its weakening properties could leach out and harm the entire team. However, Starscream has another idea. What if instead of destroying it, they used it to make the very bioweapon Megatron unleashed on them? While he does not deny it as a ruthless strategy, it is one that would work, as if they timed it right, the Decepticons would never see it coming, and the war would be over in an instant with no risk of further Autobot casualties. Gruffly, Bulkhead retorts there's just one problem. They wouldn't be Autobots anymore, since such tactics aren't how they fight, a claim which makes Starscream scowl as he petulantly mutters under his breath that he wouldn't be so sure if he knew what happened during his rescue mission. Looking back, Bulkhead tersely asks Screamy what he's mumbling about, to which the Jetbot simpers that he was just saying as the junior Autobot in this mission he will of course obey, so if the order is to destroy the Toxin, then allow him to help. Shrugging a little, Bulk grunts that in that case he can scout ahead for more Viacons, while he, Bulkhead, will carry the Toxin. Seeing no reason to pick a fight over this, Starscream complies, becoming a jet and circling the volcano, only to find no sign of further enemies. By the time he returns to report this, Bulk has already made it most of the way up to the lava pool, though it is clear that he's in a weakened state, to the point where the scrawny Starscream feels confident he could take the Wrecker in a fight. Nonetheless, he obsequiously suggests that he take the Toxin for a while so that Bulkhead can recover his strength, as it's more practical to split the load. injured, though this is far from an altruistic gesture, as while he doesn't want to be anywhere near the glowing green rock, he can't afford to have Bulkhead questioning his loyalty, since if word gets around that he's still thinking like a Decepticon, it might induce RC to reveal his lie, and if that happens... No, he's not even going to think about that, as he's come too far to let his scheme fail now. Unfortunately, it seems that Bulkhead was more upset by the bioweapon plan than Starscream had initially believed, so much so that he refused to hand the toxin over, meaning he carries it all the way to the lip of the volcano. However, even uninjured, constant toxin exposure is too much for the bulky bruiser, causing him to collapse just short of his goal. While looking down at the two lumps of green lying before him, Starscream weighs his options. As he had already stated, he could bring the toxin back to base and begin constructing the weapon, though to do so he would most likely have to scrap Bulkhead and claim this was his final order, though whether the Autobots would buy that is doubtful at best. On the other hand, he could carry out his orders, which would surely earn him points with his allies, possibly have to make up for his quote-unquote lapse in judgment around the vile Spider-Woman if that ever comes out. Yes, that might prove more valuable in the long run. Not to mention if he sets off the bioweapon, he won't get to see the look in Megatron's optics as his spark is extinguished. Having made his decision, Starscream picks up the toxin, which is surprisingly heavier than he had anticipated, and with a grunt hefts it into the lava, watching as it sinks below the molten ooze, its toxic cloud no longer a threat. From behind him, Starscream then hears the voice of Bulkhead, with it giving him such a shock he almost tumbles into the lava too, though turning around, he sees the wrecker already making his way back to his feet in a testament to his grit. Though his voice is weak, the Jetbot can also hear pride in it, as he states that he knew Screamy would do the right thing in the end. Then as he throws an arm over the Seeker's shoulder, he calls for a ground bridge, since it's time they go home, a sentiment Starscream has no disagreements with this time. Regrouping back at base, the Autobots take a moment to debrief and assess the results of their operation, with the outcome proving less than optimal, as of the 4 relics, they retrieved 1, destroyed another, and allowed 2 to fall into Decepticon hands. However, it is not all bad, as in return for their losses, they now have a means to track their enemy, not to mention Bulkhead avoided severe injury. Thanks to this, the next few episodes are skipped as Wheeljack and Miko have no need to go on a revenge quest and Bulk doesn't need to undergo intense physical therapy, meaning the next event of note comes one morning when Jack and Raph are scrubbing images of Bumblebee off the internet. In the midst of this, Raph spots something highly unexpected, a Cybertronian escape pod, which sets everyone in the base onto high alert, as this could either be a new ally to help turn the tide of the war, or if luck's against them, a powerful Decepticon here to swear allegiance to Megatron. Figuring such an occurrence merits the utmost security, even Wheeljack is summoned back to base, so the entire Autobot detachment can intercept this pod together, with Raph bridging them right to the landing site. To their dismay, when they get close, they see that it is a Decepticon pod, meaning a new enemy is likely incoming, though in fact, it is actually an old one, as having tracked the pod too, a group of Vehicons jump out and attack the Autobots. Forming up, the assorted heroes begin waging their counterattack, having become quite a cohesive unit, with even Starscream and Wheeljack slotting easily into the formation, as the former takes the air to handle the jet Vehicons, while the latter uses his explosives to blast enemies or create cover with smoke so his allies can move and attack. However, in the end, it is not any of the team who bring the battle to a close, as out of nowhere an unfamiliar red, white and blue bot bursts onto the scene and begins showing off his marksmanship, dropping Vehicons left and right. Furrowing her brow, RC asks if this guy's on their side, though it seems there isn't time for answers, as in his eagerness to impress, the stranger accidentally ignites the pod's leaking energon trail, forcing the Autobots to fall back as the Vehicons are instantly incinerated. Proving himself even more of a show-off, the newcomer then begins to gloat until he is put in his place by both RC and Starscream, who chastise this recklessness. However, in contrast, Optimus is impressed by his valor, and after learning that he is both an Autobot named Smokescreen and a fellow disciple of Alpha Trion, welcomes the rookie into their ranks. At once, Starscream begins considering the opportunity this poses, as finally he will have a subordinate within the Autobots, someone he can command at his beck and call, and someone to do the drudge work so that he no longer has to. Though, as he will soon learn, this may not be worth the cost, as not only is Smokescreen a reckless glory hound, but he is also a braggart, something Starscream cannot stand, as he has always loathed bragging. At least, when others do it. And worst of all, he is so exuberant that it's like dealing with a protoform hopped up on red energon. Speaking of which, it is not long before Raph finds some of that very substance here on Earth. Thanks to Starscream being an ally, Optimus, Bumblebee and RC are able to recover it without any issue and in its entirety, As a result of this, Ratchet has more than enough to begin studying and conducting experiments on, with its utility coming in a most unexpected way, as rather than just being a boost for the Autobots, its composition allows the Docbot to make a breakthrough with his synthetic energon project, with Ratchet theorizing that by mixing the two types of energon he could make a stable fuel that significantly enhances their strength and speed, without the drawback inherent to synthetic energon, which is that it causes the user to burn through their natural energon reserves faster, making it unsustainable and a long-term detriment overall. The only question is, how should he test his new creation, as while the simple machines he fuels with the fusion do run smoother, they can only give him limited data. Showing himself eager to help once again, Smokescreen volunteers to be the guinea pig, gushing that any doctor chosen by the great Optimus Prime must be a genius, a claim which makes Starscream roll his optics as he also hates brown-nosing. Once again, except when he does it. Nonetheless, here Ratchet refuses Smokescreen's help, stating that he still has a long way to go before he's comfortable giving anyone synthetic energon. Subsequently, the Autobots experience another lull as Ratchet works on his project and Optimus continues decrypting the Icon database, though it seems that they're not the only ones hard at work, as up on the Decepticon warship, Megatron has tasked Soundwave with not only continuing his own decryption, but also creating false sensor readings to distract the Autobots while they collect the relics. Ever the devoted servant, Soundwave delivers, so that just as Optimus uncovers a new artifact, another unforeseen one appears on their scanners. Figuring the Decepticons must also be after this, Prime sets out at once, taking RC, Bulkhead and Bumblebee with him in anticipation of a fight, though in all actuality, this is just a wild goose chase so that Megatron can lay claim to the newest artifact. Unfortunately for him, this is none other than the Star Saber, an ancient blade made by Soulless Prime, in which seemingly only a Prime can remove from the mountain in which it is buried. Recognizing this, the Decepticon leader's objective becomes keeping the saber away from Optimus at all cost, with him ordering his forces to move the mountain if that is what it takes to load the sword onto the warship. Meanwhile, back at base, Ratchet has at last picked up the Star Saber's signal, though to his dismay the away team are outside comm range, meaning the task of investigating this reading must fall to the two most junior Autobots, Starscream and Smokescreen. In spite of his less than glowing view of Smokescreen, the Jetbot cannot deny that he is pleased, as this will be his first time leading an Autobot mission, and while one rookie subordinate is a far cry from the legions he had as commander of the Decepticons, it is a start, which for now is enough to satiate his ambition. To this end, he haughtily instructs Smokescreen to follow him, with the pair employing stealth as they slip through the Grand Bridge and begin making their way towards the signal. As expected, this leads them right to the Star Saber and the Decepticon excavation effort, with Starscream feeling his energon run cold as he spies Megatron himself heading up the operation. Knowing better than to face his former master and all his minions at once, Starscream instructs Smokescreen to fall back, and they'll try contacting Prime or one of the others, though it seems his words are in one auditory sensor and out the other with the rookie, as before he can even finish his command, Smokescreen has taken off at a sprint towards the enemy. Unsurprisingly, this immediately gives their position away, and recognizing how allowing his subordinate to die the first time he is entrusted with command would hamper his ambitions, Starscream reluctantly enters the fray to back him up. Unfortunately, as he surmised earlier, 2 against an army inevitably leads to defeat, though being the wily schemer that he is, Starscream makes sure to leave his comm line open during the whole debacle, ensuring that Ratchet knows where they are, and more importantly, where to deploy reinforcements. As luck would have it is around this time that the Docbot also re-establishes communications with the other team, meaning that not long after Starscream announces his and Smokescreen's surrender, Optimus, RC, Bulkhead and Bumblebee burst into view. Taking point, RC commands Bulkbee, Starscream and Smokescreen to fall in with her, evidently intent on taking the fight to the comms, though this is far from their true objective, as while they play distraction, Optimus tears up the mountain in his truck form, just as it is lifted into the air. Knowing that this could be the moment that determines the fate of the Decepticons, Megatron himself leads the chase after his rival, opening fire with everything he has. For a moment it seems as though victory will be his, as when a purple laser strikes Optimus' side, he is apparently forced from his vehicle form and sent flying, only to reach out his hand at the last second and wrap it around the hilt of the Star Saber. At once the landscape of the battle changes, as the Autobots feel their morale raise at the sight of Optimus clutching the ancient blade of the Primes, while in contrast, every Decepticon is struck with a sense of impending doom and dread. However, this is not all they are struck with, as wielding the sword as if it were made for him, Optimus cleanly cuts through the mountain itself before unleashing a streak of blue energy which flies through the air and slams into the warship, doing serious damage and forcing the Decepticons into a hasty retreat. When the Autobots return to Outpost Omega-1, the mood is a mixture of celebration and condemnation, as while everyone is awed by the power of the Star Saber and what it might do for their cause, there is still the matter of Smokescreen to deal with. As he was the one who led him, it falls to Starscream to scold the rookie, an act which he has much practice with, snarling that Smokescreen had better never disobey his orders again, or he may find the blast that scraps him comes from behind. Though, for some reason, Starscream finds no pleasure in seeing this young hothead hang his head in shame, an oddity, as making others feel small was one of his great joys when he was commander of the Decepticons. It doesn't make any sense. Though, what is even stranger is the words that come from his lips next, as he states that while Smokescreen is a fool, he is also ambitious, and despite what some here may say, ambition is not a fault, so long as it is tempered with pragmatism. At this, Smokescreen smiles ever so slightly and vows to do better next time, earning him a snide dismissal, though no further rebukes. Meanwhile, Optimus is in the midst of a deep conversation of his own, though in his case it is with a projection of Alpha Trion inside the Starsaber, as he instructs his protege to find the final 4 Iacon relics, known as the Omega Keys, as when combined, they may hold the secret to restoring Cybertron itself. Understanding the gravity of this pronouncement, all attention is therefore turned to the acquisition of these keys, the first being located in Egypt. Eager to redeem himself, Smokescreen volunteers to go get it, though Starscream, reminding the rookie what he said earlier about pragmatism, states that Prime should go, since with his new weapon, he could handle any threat on his own. Unfortunately, it seems that he is alone in this thinking, as the others don't want Optimus to have to shoulder this burden on his own, with a compromise being reached that Optimus will go, taking both Smokescreen and Starscream with him. Truthfully, the Jetbot isn't quite sure how he got conscripted into this mission, as he didn't even want to go in the first place, after the scrap show of their last outing, but seeing the decision's been made, he gloomily follows Prime and Smokescreen through the ground bridge. As it turns out, this particular key is housed in some ancient temple, as the primitive humans believe the relic to be a gift from their god, though in that moment, Starscream is too busy being unhappy to care, as now not only is he here getting sand in his servos, but due to the passages being cramped by Cybertronian standards, he is forced to slump his wings and press them quite uncomfortably against himself just to fit in the door. Spotting the Greybot's discomfort, Prime offers Starscream the option to guard the entrance, an offer he is quick to accept, though one he will just as quickly come to regret, as in the distance he spots an inbound and all too familiar flying object, Megatron's Cybertronian jet form. Urgently, the defector cries out for Prime and the rookie, though it seems they are too deep in the tomb to hear him, meaning Starscream is all alone when Megatron shifts back into his bot form and stands over his former second-in-command with an incredibly sinister smirk. Gulping deeply, Starscream attempts to buy time for his allies to return, or possibly just until Megatron starts hurting him, by asking what he's doing here, though this goes about as well as one would expect, with the Decepticon leader snarling at him not to play dumb and to tell him where the relic is if he wishes to avoid his wrath. Recognizing that all he's doing by refusing is buying himself needless pain, as it won't take Megatron long to think to check the tomb, Starscream prepares to point, though as he turns to face the entrance he is tackled by Smokescreen mere moments before another energy wave from the Starsaber goes slamming into Megatron, launching him a considerable distance away. Stepping forth, Optimus orders his nemesis to turn back now, as he has no power to combat the Starsaber. Though cackling wickedly, Megatron replies that this is where he is wrong, as he reveals the Apex armor Dreadwing stole from him back in Antarctica, and claims that this suit is impervious to damage, meaning it seems they're at a stalemate. Refusing to believe this, Optimus manifests another streak of blue energy, though to his horror Megatron endures this, as while he is still made to feel the pain of the blow, his body is protected from the damage. Not only that, but when he retaliates a few moments later with a punch, it becomes clear that his already considerable strength has been augmented by the armor, making this anyone's fight, with the question being who will succumb to the pain first, Optimus or Megatron. Meanwhile, having risen to his feet once more, Starscream questions Smokescreen on whether he has the key, with the rookie grinning proudly as he confirms this. Nodding approvingly, the Jetbot instructs him to get some distance then call Ratchet, since right now, their priority needs to be getting the artifact away from Megatron. For a moment, it looks as though Smokescreen is going to protest that he wants to stay and fight, though remembering his recent dressing down, he instead simply salutes and then drives off to find a good place to make the call. Unfortunately, before Starscream can become a jet and follow after him, a loud clang rings through the Egyptian night, and as Starscream looks over at the source of the sound, he sees the Starsaber hurtling through the air, having evidently been knocked from Prime's hand by a well-placed punch from Megatron. At once, the two combatants scramble for it, with it seeming as though the Decepticon will reach it first, as he takes to the air as a jet, though just before he can lay his metallic fingers upon the hilt, a new challenger enters the fray, that being Starscream, who by virtue of having a more aerodynamic jet mode snakes ahead of his old master and grabs it first. In an instant, a sense of elation and power the likes of which he has never felt floods Starscream, as he realizes that with this blade in his hand, he can do whatever he wants. He could slay either Prime or Megatron and decide the outcome of the war, or else scrap them both, and declare himself supreme ruler of Autobots and Decepticons alike. So long as he has the Starsaber, none could possibly oppose him, and it would be his banner that flies above a renewed Cybertron. Not only that, but if he wanted, he could have Earth too, and every other planet in this galaxy, this universe, all at his fingertips. But then, he stops, as his mind turns away from visions of a glorious future and towards the past, specifically his time among the Autobots, to the mundane moments, the humorous and even the aggravating ones, and those he has spent them with. Somewhere along the way, they became something more than a means to an end. They became his comrades. A disquieting thought for one who has always prioritized himself and only himself, but it is true. Looking into his reflection as is cast in the Starsaber's glow, he is forced to face another truth. This is not his weapon. He is no Prime. And so with a heavy spark he relinquishes ultimate power and tosses the Starsaber back to Optimus. This decision seems to give the Autobot leader a second wind, as he fights more fiercely than he had before, though in truth Starscream barely notices, as he is lost in thought, trying to figure out at what point he changed, at what point he became the sort of fool he used to scorn, who would sacrifice personal gain for some abstract notion of right. He does not know, and perhaps he never will, though he does at least accept one last truth. In spite of his best efforts, he has allowed himself to become an Autobot. Suddenly, the burst of green and whirring sound of a ground bridge pulls him from his reverie. As he looks back, he sees Smokescreen escaping through the portal, the key still firmly in his possession. Feeling some of his old scorn coming back, Starscream jeers that Megatron has failed, the comfortable familiarity of the taunt making him feel like himself again. Likewise, the fury on his old master's face coupled with the knowledge that he cannot touch him brings the Jetbot a moment of joy. Then, without another word, he transforms and flies through the ground bridge, with Prime following soon after. As the portal closes behind them, a cheer goes up in the base, as the other Autobots are quick to celebrate the recovery of the first key, and the heroes who carried out the daring feat. Feeling he deserves this praise after all he's given up, Starscream does not hesitate to join in this time, but before he goes, he feels a hand on his wing, and as he looks back, he sees Prime smiling down at him, before giving the Jetbot his most earnest thanks. Unfortunately, the next key hunt does not go quite so well for the Autobots, as like in canon, Knockout makes use of the Resonance Blaster to take down both RC and Bumblebee with limited effort, while not long after, Bulkhead and Smokescreen engage Dreadwing in a forest. Thankfully, this latter attempt at least ends in success, as without a rogue Starscream to knock him out, Smokescreen is able to recover the key, though this does come at the cost of making him even more insufferable. Furthermore, due to not sulking over his failure, Smokescreen is still at base when Optimus decodes the final coordinate and learns the last key is inside Smokescreen himself. Due to having the phase shifter, there's a simple procedure for Ratchet to recover it, meaning that now the only question is how to obtain the key currently in the Decepticons' possession. Surprisingly, it seems that Wheeljack of all bots is central to the solution, as by using the back door he, Ratchet, and Raph installed in the warship's cloak, they are able to track where the Decepticons are, and most likely where the key can be found. Here Starscream once more proves his utility, as he reveals that he knows the location of the vault in which the key will be stored, and the code to access it, as if Megatron is the same arrogant fool he always is, he won't have bothered changing it, as he assumes no unauthorized visitor could make it past him and his Decepticon stooges, an assumption he would quite enjoy proving wrong. Looking impressed, Bulkhead asks if Screamy really wants to take on the Chief Con and his minions, though shaking his head vigorously. Starscream replies that he never said anything of the sort. Then, with a devious smile, he asks Ratchet if they have any of that unaltered red energon left. The ground bridge portal bursts to life in a small out-of-the-way supply room, before closing a few moments later, having seemingly had nothing come in or out. However, that is because the one who emerged is travelling at speeds too fast for the naked optic to perceive. Slowing down for a moment to look around, Starscream cannot help but smirk, as even the Vehicons walking the halls do not see him, meaning he is the run of the place. Making good on this, the former 2IC takes flight in his jet mode, as this is far faster than his legs, with the seemingly stationary bots becoming a blur as he makes his way into the heart of the warship. Only when the vault comes into view does Starscream revert, reaching out his thin pointed fingers and punching in the code D16 as the doors whoosh open for him. Sneering slightly at Megatron's slavish inability to let go of the past, Starscream steps inside, and as expected, the key lies waiting for him on a pedestal. Grabbing it up with a grin, the defector then turns back the way he came, and after another flight passes through the ground bridge portal just as it's beginning to close. Truly a flawless victory on his part. Now that all four keys are in the Autobots' possession, Optimus at last reveals the means through which they can be used to revive Cybertron. They must be placed inside the Omega Lock, an ancient artifact in the Sea of Rust, which is said to be a conduit for the All-Spark itself. While most of the team are somewhat disquieted at the fact that Optimus has been keeping this from them, Starscream is truthfully unconcerned, as he is more than used to his leaders lying or otherwise keeping secrets, and caring more for how exactly they're going to get to Cybertron, as he doubts they can storm the Decepticon space bridge again. However, However, here Optimus has a simple and elegant solution, as by withdrawing the Forge of Solus Prime from storage, he is able to begin upgrading their ground bridge into a functional space bridge on par with or possibly even superior to what the Decepticons have. As this is happening, the remaining Autobots set to work gathering all the relics they have acquired from storage, since while they don't necessarily believe they will have to fight when they reach their homeworld, they are all in agreement that any precaution they can take to ensure this mission succeeds is worth taking. As a result, Starscream is entrusted with the Spark Extractor, which this time he sees for the act of faith it is. However, in spite of all their preparations, when Optimus, RC, Bumblebee, Bulkhead, Smokescreen, and Starscream arrive on Cybertron, they find nothing. No ambushes, no final trials they must overcome, nothing but a long walk through the sea of rust. Finally, after several hours of trekking, the team reach the coordinates specified in Alpha Trion's message, but to their surprise, all they find is a rusty old plinth. Knowing better than to judge a book by its cover, Optimus's teammates approach, with his hunch paying off, as at once the Omega Keys all start to glow. Then, seemingly in response, glyphs begin lighting up on the plinth, which stretches down into the ground itself, so that the barren desert landscape is converted into a shrine of sorts. Smiling softly, Optimus takes a moment to thank his comrades for being here with him, as now all that is left is to place the keys into the lock, and their journey will be complete. Though, as is always the way, nothing can be so simple, as at that moment a space bridge portal opens up, and out of it marches Soundwave, Dreadwing, and Megatron. At once the Autobots prepare for a fight, though raising his hands, Megatron leers that this is not why they are here, as while he had originally hoped the tracker he placed on the Omega Key would reveal the location of the Autobots' base, when he learned that they had come to Cybertron instead, he and his followers simply had to see what they are up to. Though, now that they know their goal is to restore their homeworld, they have no intention of standing in their way. Knowing Megatron better than to take this at face value, Optimus demands to know what his nemesis gets out of this, to which Megatron placidly replies, the same as any survivor of the war, a home, though it is a shame so many did not survive, such as Cliffjumper. Predictably, this caused the Autobots' hackles to raise even further, with RC snarling that she'll scrap Megatron if he dares mention Cliff again. Though smirking, Decepticon leader retorts that her anger is misplaced, as he's not the one who killed her friend, his gaze now firmly on Starscream. For a moment, the Jetbot prepares to protest, though it seems he doesn't have to, as RC does it for him, stating with certainty that she doesn't believe him. However, this just causes a malicious grin to twist Megatron's already twisted features, as he adopts a faux sorrowful tone, and says that he didn't want to come to this, but if she insists, he does have proof. At these words, Soundwave steps forward, and as his visor lights up, everyone sees the same thing. Security camera footage of the Decepticon warship's bridge. Fear grips Starscream at this sight, as he knows exactly what is to come, but there is nothing he can do, as he sees himself leer down at a badly wounded Cliffjumper as he is brought before him. Then, without mercy, the Starscream in the video raises his fist and rams it through Cliff's spark, terminating him. As the video on Soundwave's visor comes to an end, Starscream looks over at his allies, finding a mix of anger and disappointment on their faces. None is this truer for than RC, whose expression of anguish and rage slices through the Jetbot as though the Star Saber had been plunged into his spark. After all they've been through, Starscream can only imagine what she must be going through, and so in turn endeavors to do the only thing he can in a situation like this. Run! Having come to know RC quite well since joining the Autobots, Starscream has no doubt in his mind that once she recovers from the shock, she's going to try and scrap him, a theory which is quickly proven correct, as before he can even fully assume his plane form, a shot fired from behind tears off one of his wings, making transformation impossible and forcing him to make his escape on foot. Or at least, he'll try to, when the pain of this unwanted amputation releases its grip on his body so he can move again. Over the sound of his agonized cry, Starscream next hears Prime's voice as he orders RC to stop, though based on the roaring sound he hears closing in, this seems to be a vain effort. Then, as the sound reaches its zenith, the maimed jet feels something small and fast collide with the back of his leg, tripping him, and as he hits the ground hard, RC reverts from a bike form to a robot mode, and points her blaster arm right into his face. In a voice of cold fury that does not even shake a decibel, the two-wheeler asks her captive, why? To which Starscream gasps that at the time, Cliffjumper was an enemy, so he did what everyone does in war, though this is plainly not good enough for RC, who growls that may be true, but then he had the audacity to act like he was one of them while lying about it day after day. How could he lie to her face? In a tired voice, Starscream replies that he did what he had to in order to survive, though RC growls that doesn't excuse it, he should have at least had the decency to own what he did. However, rather than making him feel penitent, this causes anger to flare in the Greybot, as he can hardly believe the hypocrisy of this claim, glaring right back as he scornfully asks if she means the same way she owns scrapping arachnid. As he had hoped, this gives the two-wheel a pause, allowing Starscream to elaborate that their situations were no different. They both saw a chance to kill a defenseless enemy and they took it, then hid the choice out of shame. So while she can end him now, she can't change the fact that when push came to shove, she proved herself no better than him. Satisfied with his spiteful last words, Starscream watches as RC's features darken, with it appearing that she will take him up on that offer of ending him. Though appearances can be deceiving, as in a voice of calm that barely holds back oceans of rage, she tells him that's true, but she's done being like him. She then commands him to stand up and fight so she can kill him on his feet, since that's how Cliff would do it. However, before he can even move a servo, the jeering voice of Megatron cuts in, as he taunts that it seems Optimus cannot even keep his own subordinates from scrapping each other, so what hope does he have to rule a whole planet? Perhaps it would be best if the stewardship of Cybertron fell to someone else. At these words, a new space bridge portal opens up, one far bigger than the one Megatron, Soundwave, and Dreadwing arrived through, with an army of Vehicons pouring out, who quickly surround the shrine. Leering menacingly, Megatron commands the Autobots to surrender and hand over the Omega Keys, though knowing this could mean centuries or even millennia of Decepticon rule, Optimus refuses, commanding the others to retreat and protect the keys, while calling Ratchet to open their space bridge back to base. Obediently, the Autobots flee, with even RC reluctantly turning away from Starscream, as she's smart enough to know that getting herself killed for vengeance is pointless, a lesson she tries very hard to forget that she learned from him. Spotting the green portal blossoming in the distance, the Autobots transform into their vehicle modes, using these to dart between their enemies' legs and gain the speed required to reach the space bridge in time. That is aside from Starscream, who due to having lost his wing is unable to transform, meaning he must run after the others. Unfortunately, his legs are simply not fast enough to carry him to the portal before it closes, with the Jetbot having a sneaking suspicion Ratchet might have closed it prematurely as his own means of punishing him for Cliffjumper's murder. Nonetheless, this leaves him at the mercy of the Decepticons and Vehicons, who are quick to pin him down and recover the Omega Key he stole from them, before laying into him for one of the most savage beatings of his life. Having endured more than his fair share of these in his time, or at least he believes it to be more than his fair share, Starscream braces himself, curling into a ball and watching as Megatron approaches with a cruel smile on his face. Bitterly, the failed defector asks if his old master's gonna kill him now, though Megatron grins such a fate would be too quick and merciful for filth such as him. No, they're going to leave him to die of energon loss, afraid and alone on this barren world. Briefly, Starscream sees this as something of a lifeline, as he's got enough energon to last him a while, though having evidently factored for this, Megatron helps speed up the process by shooting him in the side. Letting out a strained gurgle of agony, Starscream clutches his side, only to find it sticky and wet as the life-giving fluid begins pooling on the ground far faster than he would like. However, it seems that this isn't fast enough for Dreadwing, who requests permission to finish the traitor off personally. Though shaking his head, Megatron growls that they can't afford to waste time on giving their old friend Starscream the sort of end he's sure Dreadwing would like to, not when there are still 3 more Omega Keys to recover. He then asks Soundwave if he has the last coordinates their tracker put out before arriving on Cybertron, and when the mute menace nods, Megatron orders the warship to be moved there as that's where the Autobots will be, before the 3 of them depart via space bridge to lead the charge. While Starscream is concerned for his allies, he is more concerned for himself in this moment, as if he stays here, he'll die. Gritting his teeth as it takes all his willpower to stand, the Jetbot hobbles over to where his wing fell and gathers it up, before beginning the long slog out of the sea of rust. Each step of his journey is agony, made worse by the mental anguish of knowing that continual movement will force more energon out of him than if he was still. However, it is only through this movement that he has a chance, as his wanderings are not the aimless ones of a doomed bot, but instead a purposeful march towards his one and only hope. Deep beneath the city of Kaon lies the wreckage of a space bridge he and Shockwave had constructed, before ironically RC and Cliffjumper destroyed it during their desperate escape to Earth. Nonetheless, assuming nothing further has happened to it, it should be repairable, and while materials may be scarce, he is nothing if not patient and resourceful. Not to mention, Shockwave had a lab there, so there should at least be a medkit he can use to patch himself up, meaning it's his best chance if he wishes to avoid becoming one with the Allspark prematurely. After several days and sleepless nights thanks to his slowed pace, Kaon comes into view, and with it the self-aggrandizing statue of Megatron, meant to inspire his idiot followers and frighten his enemies. Were he not so weak right now, he would have greatly enjoyed launching his missiles into it and watching it topple, though recognizing that he may not have the seconds to spare as his energon levels are dangerously low, he proceeds through the streets and into the tunnel which will lead him down to the space bridge. One consequence of such severe energon loss is a sense of lightheadedness and general lack of perception, a fact Starscream is rudely reminded reminded of a few moments later, as before he's even a few steps into the tunnel, a security system activates, trapping him between two force fields. Groaning unhappily, the bleeding bot bemoans that he shouldn't die here. He's smarter than this. Though from out of the darkness, a new voice asks if that is truly the case, before stepping forth to reveal none other than Shockwave. For a moment, Starscream cannot speak, having never imagined the scientist could have survived his run with RC, though this just gives Shockwave a chance to speak, as in his measured voice he states that Starscream is late. Balking a little at this reception, the Jetbot demands to know what the Cyclopean scientist means, to which Shockwave replies that he presumes Starscream's return is to search for him and return him to Lord Megatron's service. Is that not correct? Seeing a chance to spin this to his advantage, Starscream leers that yes, he was sent here by Lord Megatron himself, though this is met with some suspicion, as Shockwave's singular red optic falls upon the Autobot insignia on his chest. Gulping, the Jetbot improvises, hastily replying that in order to reach Kaon safely, their master had him infiltrate the Autobots, as they have put systems in place to prevent Decepticons from returning to their homeworld, which is also why it's taken him so long to come back for him. But alas, before he could make contact, his deception was discovered, and those treacherous Autobots tried to destroy him. At first, Shockwave says nothing, merely surveying Starscream, with it being all the Defector can do not to cry out in panic, though, just before his frayed nerves can break entirely, the mad scientist nods that all visual evidence supports this story, before lowering the force field and instructing Starscream to follow him. Knowing Shockwave is not one to lie or employ mind games, the Jetbot feels safe to follow, though for good measure he stays just out of reach. As they go, Shockwave questions how Starscream intends to get them off-world if this embargo is still in place, to which the Defector replies that this is where Shockwave comes in, as Lord Megatron wants him to repair the space bridge the two of them were building and use that to return to Earth. Factually, Shockwave agrees that this should be possible in a relatively short span of time, with the pair setting to work as soon as Starscream's repairs are completed and his energon supply has been replenished. Due to Shockwave being, well, Shockwave, there are no breaks once they begin, though for once Starscream does not complain, as he is desperate to return to Earth as soon as possible to check on his allies, not even grumbling when Shockwave uses him as a gopher, dispatching him to gather resources not readily available in the lab. In fact, Starscream is pretty sure the only reason he reaffixed his wing was for that very purpose, though since he did fix him up, he's willing to forgive the motive. Due to not being much of a talker, Shockwave does not press Starscream for details beyond a basic rundown of the current state of the war, something the Jet can answer honestly as he claims that while it is turbulent, the Decepticons recently snatched a great victory out of their enemies' hands, so that now the future of the Autobots is more uncertain than ever. This naturally pleases Shockwave, and playing his part well, Starscream acts pleased as well, though his spark is plagued by a gnawing anxiety, as he can only hope his allies manage to escape whatever Megatron was planning for them when he returned to Earth. Finally, after several weeks of non-stop labour, the pair are able to get their space bridge in working order, though before they can go, Shockwave instructs Starscream to assist him in assembling his research materials, as he has much to show their master. As it turns out, by research materials, the mad machine means a slumbering Predacon that almost makes Starscream spring a leak when he sees it. Proudly, Shockwave reveals that he cloned it during his isolation, and that it is not the first, as eons ago he dispatched many more of these beasts to Earth, so once he is settled in, he will begin retrieving their bones and cloning them to create a Predacon army for Lord Megatron. This is a truly terrifying thought. Though keeping his composure, Starscream sighs that he has no doubt their master will be thrilled. Then, when Shockwave has everything they need, the two of them along with the now awakened Predacons step through the space bridge. Having thought ahead, Starscream had set their arrival coordinates for the Antarctic, as he can fly while Shockwave can't, making it a perfect place to abandon him, since while he is grateful for the repairs and a means to get back to Earth, Shockwave is simply too dangerous and deranged to allow back into Megatron's service. Unfortunately, now he has to extricate himself from the company of the mad bot and his giant snarling pet, a matter made more tricky when Shockwave commands him to summon the warship. Falling back on his old staple of lying his way out of problems, having evidently not tumbled to the fact that this often causes just as many problems as it solves, Starscream protests that the comms are bad here, and he'll go look for somewhere with clearer signal. Unfortunately, this is one lie too many, as Shockwave reveals that his scanners are not picking up any interference, which logically means that he is trying to get away from him, while stranding him and his creation in a place where they will quickly freeze and go offline. Therefore, the next logical conclusion is that if Starscream wishes to A. see him perish, and B. keep him from contacting Lord Megatron, then he is not, as he claims, on a deep cover mission, and has in fact defected to the Autobots, making him an enemy and a traitor. At this last word, the Predacon rears up and roars, and knowing to wait for Shockwave to sick that thing on him, he flees. Nonetheless, Shockwave does indeed command his monster to tear the jetbot to pieces, with it taking flight and forcing Starscream to push his afterburners to their absolute limit, as he has no desire to have more pieces of him torn off so soon after having the last ones patched up. Mercifully, he is able to escape the Predacon somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, and seeing no reason to wait, flies off in the direction of the Autobot base, planning what he's going to say all the while, and finding the notion of reuniting with his allies almost as terrifying as the Predacon. However, it seems the time for such a reunion is not yet at hand, as when he comes into visual range for Autobot Outpost Omega-1, he finds the entire mesa has been reduced to rubble. For a moment, a sense of immense sadness washes over Starscream, as he assumes the others must have fallen with the base, though this is brought to an abrupt halt when he spots that idiot rookie poking his head out of the ground thanks to the phase shifter. While normally this would be a relief, as it is proof his comrades are not dead, a pair of Vehicons are currently combing through the rubble, meaning at any moment they could turn around and see Smokescreen. That is, unless something else were to draw their attention, and so gritting his teeth, Starscream does the only thing he can to help his ally as he dives low and into the Vehicon's line of sight. As expected, the two drones recognize their erstwhile commander and immediately give chase, though this is all part of the plan, as taking off in the opposite direction from Smokescreen, he flies low to the ground while leading the duo into a narrow canyon. Naturally, the pair assume he is trying to lose them and therefore maintain an even closer pursuit, though they will quickly come to rue this decision, as once Starscream is satisfied with their speed, he shifts back into his robot form and allows them to overshoot him. Then, before they can turn back or even brake, he fires his wrist missiles into their exhausts, obliterating them instantly. Now that the threat has passed, Starscream is at last able to return to where Smokescreen stands waiting for him, with the rookie thanking him for clearing out the Vehicons, though in a tone that makes it clear he has not forgiven him for what they all learned back on Cybertron. Figuring that's about as good as he can hope for, Starscream asks what happened and why the upstart race car is still here, to which Smokescreen begins filling him in, explaining that when they got back to base, they were immediately ambushed by the Con warship, and that Optimus had them scattered to protect themselves and the Omega Keys, though he stayed behind to make sure their leader made it out too. After an infuriating pause, during which time the rookie does not elaborate, Starscream both testily and nervously asks the important question, did he? With it coming as an immense relief when Smokescreen nods. However, this comes with a fairly sizable but, as it's revealed that while Prime survived, he is badly injured, and the only thing that can save him is the Forge of Solus Prime. Growling frustratedly, Starscream surmises that the Forge must have been lost in the evacuation, and if Smokescreen can't find it in the wreckage, then that must mean Megatron has it. Nodding gravely, the Carbot agrees that that's his theory too, so he's been racking his process for how to get on board the warship to get it back, though here Starscream stops him, stating that he'll go. Worriedly, Smokescreen asks if he's sure, to which the defector snaps that of course he's sure. He's the only one who can fly up there, so it has to be him. Not to mention that if he fails, the Autobots haven't lost anything they weren't already prepared to part with. Choosing not to think on this too deeply, Smokescreen instead informs Starscream that the warship has been patrolling this area pretty consistently since the base fell, presumably in case any of them came back, though they're lucky it took off south a while ago without warning, otherwise they'd have been spotted. Shaking his head in dismay, Starscream retorts that they are far from lucky, as this more than likely means Shockwave has managed to make contact with Megatron, and they're on their way to pick him up. Furrowing his brow in evident concern over the mad scientist's brutal reputation, the young elite guardsman asks why Shockwave's here. Though shaking his head, Starscream protests that it's not important, before taking off back the way he came, so he can catch the warship either on their way to or from the Antarctic and recover both the Forge and his lost Omega Key. Thanks to Smokescreen's information and the loan of the phase shifter, finding the ship and passing directly through the hull and into the vault are not difficult tasks, though the same cannot be said for remaining undetected, as just when he's about to wrap his long fingers around the key, the vault door opens, and Knockout steps through it. Diving to the side just in time to avoid being spotted by the Decepticon doctor, Starscream listens as he marches over and snatches up the key, grumbling something about Shockwave wanting to see it, in a tone that suggests Knockout holds the same low esteem for the Cyclopean scientist as him. Knowing better than to try and retrieve the key right from out of his or Shockwave's hands, Starscream bides his time, waiting until Knockout is gone before returning to his primary mission of locating and retrieving the Forge of Solus Prime. However, in what can only be referred to as the latest addition to his mounting pile of failures, he quickly discovers the Forge is gone, presumably having been doled out to one of Megatron's followers as a reward for their part in vanquishing the Autobots. Letting out an exasperated growl, Starscream allows himself to phase back through the floor so that he may fly along the underside of the ship, and poke his head up occasionally to see if he can find the room the key or forge have been moved to. Unfortunately, even after several attempts he does not find either, though what he does find is an all too familiar face, Wheeljack, looking rather worse for wear as he hangs suspended by energy shackles, having evidently endured his fair share of torture. Peering down at Starscream him with his one open optic, the Wrecker gruffly asks if Scream is here to finish him off too. Letting out a bemused growl, the Jetbot warns him not to tempt him. All the same, he immediately sets to work disabling Jackie's cuffs, and when the Bruiser hits the ground, he offers a wing to lean on so he can remain standing. While the phase shifter would allow them both to pass through the floor so long as they're in contact, Starscream highly doubts that he could hold Wheeljack's weight while in flight, and due to him not having an alt mode that can fly on his own, it seems the prudent course of action is to stay inside the ship and proceed on foot until they can recover their prizes and reach an escape pod. Or at least, it would be the prudent path if there weren't a swarm of Vehicons standing right outside the cell door while Megatron and Dreadwing stand at their head. Smirking, the Decepticon leader asks if Starscream really thought he didn't know he was here, considering this is his 4th time sneaking aboard their ship. And while there are countless sarcastic retorts he would love to hurl back at his former master, it seems that in his fear he has misplaced his tongue, and so only makes vague noises, which seem to amuse Dreadwing. Looking over at the new second-in-command, Starscream is surprised to see the Forge of Solus Prime slung over his back, though whether it is a pleasant surprise or an unpleasant one is yet to be seen, as with all optics squarely locked on him, it would be rather difficult to reach the weapon while also lugging Wheeljack behind him. However, that may actually be the solution, as leaning in he whispers to the Wrecker asking if he can move. Gruffly, Wheeljack replies that he can, but not too fast, though Starscream replies that this isn't an issue, as he slips the phase shifter onto him and instructs him to grab the forge and jump. So long as he remains intangible until he hits the water, he should survive. From there, he just needs to contact Smokescreen and get the hammer back to Prime ASAP. Looking a little confused, Wheeljack asks what about Starscream? Though smirking, the Jetbot replies that he has his own means of escape. Then, without preamble or dignity, he flees, screaming hysterically and transforming into a plane as he attempts to draw the enemies away just like he did outside the base. Unfortunately, while then he was dealing with Vehicons, here he must contend with Megatron himself, who knowing his cowardly former lieutenant well, does not miss a beat, grabbing him by the wings and tossing him into a wall with enough force that he reverts back to his robot mode. However, while the escape part of the plan did not succeed, the distraction part does, as using the moment of chaos to his advantage, Wheeljack launches forward and phases right through Dreadwing to grab the forge, before it and he sink through the floor and out of sight. This at least serves as some small comfort, even if his natural bitterness has Starscream wishing he'd never found the Bruiser, since then he could have made that escape himself. Nonetheless, he is not given much time to regret this, as he is promptly hauled to his feet and dragged back into Wheeljack's cell, where a set of cuffs and wing clamps are quickly located and slapped onto him, with none of the gentleness the Autobots used when they took him prisoner so long ago. Then, when it is absolutely certain that he can't weasel his way to freedom, Megatron commands Dreadwing and the Vehicons to bring him, since it's time they rid themselves of this pesky traitor once and for all. Wordlessly, Starscream's captors begin dragging him, and knowing the layout of the ship well, he initially believes they're taking him to the bridge to execute him like Cliffjumper. What irony that would be. Though this is proven false when they turn down another corridor and out onto the flight deck. Here Shockwave is waiting for them, and having a pretty good idea what Megatron has in store for him, he begins to plead, begging for Megatron not to do this, to consider his years of service and kill him personally, or let Dreadwing do it, anyone but the sadistic Cyclops. Chuckling slightly at Starscream's terror, Megatron assures his former subordinate that Shockwave will not be the one to terminate him. No, that honor goes to his pet, with this execution also serving as a demonstration of the Predacons' power for all Decepticons to see. At once, Shockwave presses on a device, and in the distance a roar is heard, with this soon being coupled with the sound of terrible wing beats as the monster's silhouette comes into view. Try though he might, Starscream cannot will his body to move, being rooted to the spot as the Predacon draws near. Then, as its massive body touches down on the flight deck, Megatron shoves him towards the beast. Spotting its prey, the Predacon wastes no time going on the attack, as it attempts to bite him in two with its razor fangs. Fortunately, Starscream's legs give way at just the right moment to avoid this grisly fate, though now he must contend with its taloned paws as it tries to crush him, forcing the Jetbot to roll for his life. Frantically, Starscream looks around for anything that can help him, and spying a slight gap in the crowd of Vehicons assembled to watch his demise, he scrambles for it. Not because he believes he'll be able to fly to freedom, but because at least death by fall will be quick rather than the protracted and agonizing end he's likely to face at the hands of Shockwave's monstrosity. Unfortunately, fate denies Starscream even this, as before he can reach the end, he is shoved back into the makeshift arena by the crowd, while Megatron jeers that he would have made a poor gladiator. Acidly, the Jetbot retorts that he doubts even Megatron himself could have done better with his hands bound and no weapons, though he is promptly reminded Megatron is not the one he should be concerned with, as the Predacon's talons rake his back and send him crashing to the floor. Once more Starscream attempts to crawl away, though this time the beast is wise to his tricks, planting a paw on his already scratched frame and dragging him slowly back towards it, suggesting that it's done playing with its food. Rolling over weakly, Starscream looks up into the bestial optics of the creature who will surely be the last thing he ever sees. Though, before it can land its killing blow, the sound of a blaster shot rings out, with it hitting the Predacon and forcing it to wince. At once, everyone begins looking around wildly for the shooter, with Starscream spotting them first, though even still, he can hardly believe what he's seeing. It's Prime, and not only is he looking stronger than he ever has before, but he's flying thanks to a set of newly acquired wings. In spite of all his fear, Starscream cannot help but smirk for a second, as he always knew the other Autobots were jealous of his ability to fly, though now is not the time for such thoughts, as when Prime fires off a second blast, the Predacon retreats, its animal instincts pushing it to avoid this pain again. This allows Optimus to land heroically on the flight deck, and summoning his sword, he slashes twice, severing Starscream's hand and wing cuffs. In a tone of bafflement, the Jetbot asks what he's doing here, to which Optimus calmly replies that he came to save him, as he would for any Autobot in need. Then, as he pulls him to his feet, he commands Starscream to transform and fall back. Not needing to be told twice as a horde of Decepticons and Vehicons are closing in, Starscream leaps into the air and assumes his plane form, while taking off at top speed, though he does not flee, instead hanging back to ensure Prime makes it out too. However, these concerns are wholly unfounded, as with his new upgrade, the Autobot leader is quickly able to knock away any cons who try to grab him before taking flight as well, and heading back the way he came with Starscream right behind him. As they head for the ground, Starscream questions if Wheeljack and Smokescreen made it to him in one piece, with Prime confirming they made it just in time, as he was about to become one with the Allspark, though now he is renewed, and with it, so is their fight for the future of this world and Cybertron. Finding some reassurance in this claim, the Jetbot asks what the next step is, to which Optimus answers that now they must locate their other allies and find a way to bring them home. That is, once they have a place to bring them. However, here Starscream speaks up, as he states that he might know just the place, and so taking point, he leads Optimus to the derelict ruins of the Harbinger. When they arrive, he proudly declares that this should be perfect, as the only Decepticon who knew its location is Arachnid, and she's gone. Not to mention it has a ground bridge and Primus knows what other Cybertronian technology, so if they play their cards right, it could be as good as their old base. Nodding approvingly, Optimus states that Starscream has done well, a statement which means more to the Jetbot than his leader might realize. Then, as Wheeljack and Smokescreen arrive at the coordinates they were sent, Prime leads them all inside, with instructions to fire up the ground bridge, as it's time for Team Prime to be reunited. Thankfully, due to being relatively untouched, it does not take long before the familiar green portal is humming to life inside the Harbinger, and as Optimus sends out a message on all Autobot channels for those still alive to respond with their coordinates, he is delighted to receive 4 replies, one from every scattered Autobot. Punching in the locations as he receives them, Starscream watches as one by one they start coming through the ground bridge. First Bulkhead and Miko, then B, Raph and Ratchet, and finally RC and Jack. At the sight of their friends all together again, the Autobots and their human partners rejoice, while also complimenting Optimus on his new look and teasing Wheeljack about needing a new paint job and a good buffing. However, when their optics fall on Starscream, the mood changes drastically, with Bulkhead saying what they're all thinking, as he demands to know what he's doing here. Straightening up a little, Starscream prepares to explain himself, though before he can, Optimus steps up and graciously states that were Starscream not here, he would not be alive, as the Jetbot was instrumental in saving his life. In a disapproving tone, Ratchet asks if that's meant to make everything okay, and they should just forget what he's done. Though shaking his head, Optimus informs his friend that this is not what he is saying. Like all of them, he will continue to mourn the loss of Cliffjumper every day, though he must also acknowledge what has happened since then, and it is plain to him that the Starscream who did that heinous deed, and the one who risked his life for him are different, so he will accept the defector for who he has become, and that is an ally and an Autobot. Evidently, this does not sit well with the others, though for RC it is utterly unacceptable, a fact she makes quite plain to Optimus, as she tells him that while she respects him more than anyone, if that's his decision, then she's leaving, since she simply cannot be part of the same unit as the bot who scrapped her partner. This causes a look of deep sadness to cross the Prime's face, though in his usual sagely manner, he replies that if this is her choice, he will respect it, though he hopes she knows she will always be welcome back on Team Prime. Nodding gravely, RC thanks him, then without another word, she turns and begins heading for the ground bridge. However, it seems not everyone is content with the idea of her leaving, as running up beside her, Jack urges the two-wheeler to stay, asking what about their partnership. Sighing soberly, RC assures him that they will remain partners, and she'll check up on him frequently, so he had best keep out of trouble. She just can't be here right now. Letting out a sigh of his own, Jack admits that he understands that, and stepping back to join the others, he watches RC go. Unfortunately, there is no time for the Autobots to grieve their loss, nor do they even have time to fully explore their new base, as now that they're back together, Starscream begins filling them in on what he's learned regarding Shockwave and the Predacon bones he means to collect. Thankfully, due to the Harbinger being a Decepticon ship, it does not take long for Ratchet and Raph to upgrade their scanners so they can pick up on the fossils too, with it being good they do, as not long after settling in, they receive 2 readings, one in Texas and the other in Scotland. Figuring Megatron might be in Texas as it's closer to the warship's last location, Optimus selects to go there personally, taking Bumblebee and Smokescreen with him, while Bulkhead is assigned to lead the mission to Scotland. Due to Ultra Magnus being absent thanks to the Omega Lock never discharging and calling him to Earth, and Wheeljack still recovering from being tortured, Starscream is the only combatant available to accompany Bulkhead, a fact the ex-Wrecker is none too happy about, as he asks Miko to come with him, since at least that way he'll have someone who can watch his back. This childishness continues even after they leave the Harbinger, as when they reach the top of the cliff which their scanners suggest will lead down to the Predacon bone, Starscream offers to fly down and retrieve it, only for Bulkhead and Miko to act as though they don't hear him, with the green bot clumsily scaling down the cliff face while the human perches on his shoulder. Rolling his optics at this behaviour, the jetbot then prepares to fly down anyway, only to spot something coming out of a cave at the bottom of the canyon, a Viacon scout. Recognizing they are not alone, Starscream attempts to warn his companions, though continuing to ignore him, they pay this no heed, and are therefore spotted. Growling at how this all could have been avoided, Starscream transforms and rushes down to assist Bulkhead in the fight, though it is already too late, as before either Autobot can scrap him, the Viacon calls for help, with Dreadwing's voice coming out of the comm as he confirms that he is on his way, and he's bringing the beast. Knowing just how deadly this thing is, Starscream tells Bulkhead they need to act fast, as they cannot defeat the Predacon alone, though once again, this is met with stony silence. Having had about all he can take, Starscream yells at Bulkhead to stop being an idiot and listen to him. If he wants to punish him for Cliffjumper by ignoring him for the rest of eternity, that's fine, but start when the mission's done, since right now, he's the only one who's fought the Predacon and knows its strength firsthand. So all Bulkhead will accomplish by refusing to use his knowledge is getting himself and his little human friend killed. This at last gives Bulkhead pause, as in a flat tone, he tells Starscream to speak. Knowing they have no time to waste, the Defector insists they head into the cave and grab the fossil as quickly as they can, then get out. It's the only chance they have at survival. Huffing slightly, Bulkhead calls this typical screamer, always picking the cowardly option. He can't believe he ever thought there was a hint of decency in his spark. Huffing now too as he leads the way, Starscream protests that they're not mutually exclusive, as while he will make no claims that he doesn't prize self-preservation, he's learned to care for others and to be a better bot, something Bulkhead is partially responsible for. While Bulk merely meets this with a disbelieving grunt, Miko curiously asks what her buddy did, with Starscream recounting their mission to recover the toxin, and how it was Bulk who convinced him not to use it as a bioweapon against the Decepticons. At the time he thought it was because he wanted to kill Megatron himself, but now he realizes the bruiser changed his perspective. Unfortunately, this earns a scoff from the ex-Wrecker, who asks how they're supposed to know that wasn't just another lie, to which Starscream sighs that he guesses they'll just have to make up their own minds whether they believe him or not. However, before more can be said on the matter, the sound of heavy wing beats fills the royalty's senses, and looking back, the team spot the Predacon landing at the entrance of the cave with Dreadwing mounted on its back. Seeing that time has run out, Bulkhead yells for them to book it, forcing the Autobots to charge headlong deeper into the cave, as while what lays ahead is uncertain, what lies behind is very clear, a monster they can't defeat. Naturally, Dreadwing and his monstrous mount give chase, with the Predacon letting loose bursts of fire breath that the Autobots only narrowly avoid. Fortunately, before the beast can get lucky and barbecue one of its targets, the tunnel narrows down enough that the Predacon's shoulders get stuck. However, this is at best a temporary fix, as from the other side, the Autobots hear Dreadwing assuring the monster that he will free it shortly, and then they will crush their enemies together. Hoping to avoid that particular fate, Starscream hastily begins trying to call for a ground bridge, though to his dismay the heavy layers of rock are blocking his signal, meaning they're on their own. Or at least, that is what he thinks until Bulkhead points at a small gap in the cave roof that Miko can climb through, since maybe once she's out there, she can contact Ratchet or Agent Fowler. Nodding her understanding, Miko begins to climb, while down below, Starscream and Bulkhead watch as the tunnel wall bursts open, allowing Dreadwing and the Predacon to step into the cavern. At once, the current Decepticon 2IC zeroes in on Starscream, wanting some long overdue payback for his twin, which means Bulkhead is forced to face the prehistoric dragon on his own. Neither matchup is particularly favourable for the Autobots, as Dreadwing slams into the other jetbot, keeping him trapped in close range, while the Predacon grabs Bulk in its mouth and tosses him into walls like a chew toy. Due to his massive frame, each impact causes dust and small fragments of rock to fall onto the combatants, with this giving Starscream an idea. though a terrible one. Evidently, Bulkhead has the same thought, as he tells Starscream to fire his missile at the roof of the cavern, since while they'll be crushed by the cave-in, they'll take out the Con's second-in-command and their strongest weapon in the Predacon, so it's a worthwhile trade. Wouldn't the schemer agree? Exhaling deeply, Starscream nods that while he hates to admit it, and he truly does, Bulk's right. Then, as he screws up his optics so he doesn't have to see his end coming, he fires, and he hears the heavy rumbling of the cave collapsing all around him. For a time, the Scottish Highlands are still as the rock slide abates, and the new pile of rubble settles into place. None who visit this place will ever know why the collapse happened, or the sacrifice it required, only seeing a strange natural phenomenon. However, one thing they will not see is Dreadwing or the Predacon, as a short time later, they emerge from the wreckage, badly beaten but still operational, though whether they'll remain so is anyone's guess, as they must now report back to Lord Megatron and explain that the bone was destroyed in the blast. Following their departure, another silence falls, as does night, with no sign of Starscream or Bulkhead, though, just when it seems that all hope is lost, the ex-wrecker emerges. Wasting no time, he begins to dig, calling out for his comrade, with it not taking long to find Starscream lying on his back, having evidently taken the most damage due to being the smallest and the one at the epicenter of the blast. Despite his injuries, Starscream cannot help but use this opportunity to snark at Bulkhead, claiming that if he didn't know better, he'd say the big brute was worried about him. Coolly, Bulk replies that he wouldn't go that far, though he's at least impressed. Screaming was ready to lay down his life without a second thought, so while that doesn't make what he did okay, he's at least willing to acknowledge that he has changed. Sitting up gingerly, Starscream states that this is good enough for now. Then as Ratchet's voice fills his head, having apparently been trying to contact him since Miko called from a nearby human village, he gratefully accepts the offer of a ground bridge and begins hobbling towards it, with Starscream this time slinging his arm over the Greenbot's shoulder. Unfortunately, there is no rest for the wicked, as no sooner than the Scotland team arrive back at base, and Miko shows them the piece of Predacon bone she found during her climb, meaning the mission wasn't a total loss, Fowler comes barging in to inform them of Decepticon activity in New Mexico. Since the new arrivals are injured and Prime's team is still in Texas, Jack suggests contacting RC, with Ratchet agreeing as she's still an Autobot, so he believes she'll help so long as she doesn't have to interact with certain bots. His icy tone making Starscream feel even worse than when he had a Mesa fall on him, as he cannot deny that his actions are directly responsible for them being down an Autobot when they're already spread too thin as is. Speaking up again, Jack suggests that he should go join RC, so she has someone watching her back, though clearing his throat, Wheeljack retorts that he'll do it. After all, he feels much better now, and besides, he can't stand being cooped up here anyway. Not buying this for a second, but also recognizing the dire situation they're in, Ratchet reluctantly agrees, though with the warning that he'll ground bridge him right back if he overexerts himself. Saluting sarcastically, the other wrecker smirks that he wouldn't dream of it. Then, as he steps through the ground bridge, he arrives not only in New Mexico, but in the middle of a Viacon horde. Grinning that today must be his birthday, Wheeljack quickly sets to work dispatching them with his dual blades, employing such proficiency that by the time RC rolls in, having received Ratchet's call, the cons are all gone, and Wheeljack teases that she's late to the party. Not being in the mood for jokes after all that's happened, RC tersely tells him to come on, with the pair rolling out as they head for the cave where the Predacon bone is located. As they go, Wheeljack attempts to engage the two-wheeler in conversation, filling her in on everything that's happened while she's been away, with RC asking after the Darbies, since she's not had a chance to visit them yet. Earnestly, Wheeljack replies that they miss her. Everyone misses her, though shutting this down, the bike firmly states that he knows why she can't go back. Grunting in the affirmative, Wheeljack agrees that he knows. In fact, he knows better than anyone why she doesn't want to stick around. But he also knows that she's wrong. At once, RC comes to a screeching halt, and as the pair both revert to their robot forms, RC demands to know what he means by wrong. Bluntly, Wheeljack states that he's not going to give her some greater good speech. He just thinks she's letting her anger and grief over Cliff cloud her judgment and lead her down a path she doesn't want to be on. Definitely mad now, RC asks who Wheeljack thinks he is telling her what she shouldn't do, when he spent megacycles gallivanting around the galaxy playing Wrecker, and even when he came to Earth, he refused to join the team since it was too stifling for him. Holding his ground, Jackie replies that this is why he can tell her, because she's making the same mistakes he did, since he lost a lot of quality time with folks he cares about like Bulk and Miko, since he was too hard-headed, but it's not too late for her to learn from him and come back. Angrily, RC asks what about Starscream, to which Wheeljack replies that he's made some pretty terrible mistakes too, but it's like Prime said, he's changed since then. Back on the warship, he saved his life, and Prime's life, and from what Bulk's told him, he even saved her life during the fight with Unicron. Unfortunately, this only earns him a scathing snort, as RC sneeringly questions if that makes everything okay then. Sure, he scrapped her partner, and Primus knows how many other friends, not to mention hid the truth of it and lied to her face, but he did some nice things too, so she ought to just forgive him. Is that it? Flatly, Wheeljack replies that no, it isn't. He hasn't forgiven Screamy and he doesn't expect RC to either, but he also thinks the Jetbot's done enough to deserve a chance to earn their forgiveness, without having his spark ripped from his chest on sight. Sighing deeply, RC replies that she doesn't think she has it in her to give him that, with this putting an end to the conversation as they transform back and resume driving to the site of the Predacon bone. Likewise, when they arrive, the excavation is done in silence, with the only thing to break it being a call from Jack. Worriedly, RC asks her human friend what's wrong, to which the boy reveals that his mum and Agent Fowler went to the museum to collect another of the bones, but they never reported in, and now he's in the parking lot, and all that's there is her phone. Recognizing how scared and overwhelmed the boy is sounding, RC vows to find June, with Wheeljack nodding at her to go, since he can take it from here. However, before she does, he sighs that he hopes she'll at least consider what he's said, though the only response he gets is RC transforming into a bike and tearing off in search of the humans. Unfortunately, even with all her determination and smarts, she will not be able to find them, as presently, June and Agent Fowler are captives aboard the Decepticon warship, since like in canon, Knockout ambushed them at the museum, though unlike in canon, due to Dreadwing taming the Predacon by treating it with respect, it did not destroy the comm relay, meaning Knockout could immediately groundbridge back with both the Talon and 2 hostages. Figuring they could be used as bargaining chips to make the Autobots hand over any fossils they have acquired, Megatron assembles his senior staff to discuss a plan, though it seems there will be one uninvited guest, the Predacon itself, who reveals not only that it can transform, taking on a robot form, but also that it is intelligent. This gives Megatron a moment of pause, as while this Predacon, who names himself Predaking, does swear allegiance to the Decepticon cause, this does not mean that all his kind will do the same. Not only that, but should this new king decide that he and his kind should rule, their combined strength would be too much for even him to handle, so for the sake of control, the Predacon cloning initiative must be halted, and the unfinished specimens terminated. Ever the pragmatist, Shockwave agrees with his master's conclusion, and due to no Starscream being present, settles on the direct route, simply groundbridging to his lab and flushing the tanks, all the while the other Decepticons attempt to distract Predaking so he does not learn what they have done. However, this is not to say that nobody knows, as back in the Harbinger, Shockwave's report to Megatron comes in loud and clear. Seeing this for the game changer it is, Ratchet is quick to assemble the others and fill them all in, with this resulting in the first feelings of hope anyone here has had since the reunion, as now that Project Predacon is cancelled, they are at last free to take the fight back to the Decepticons without worry about the looming threat of a Predacon army. Looking to Optimus, the Autobots ask what they should do now, and adopting a determined expression, the leader replies that now is the time for action, so he believes the best course is to storm the warship, so they may rescue their captive allies and recover the relics that were stolen from them, chief among them being the last Omega Key, as he has not given up on his dream of reviving Cybertron. As one, the Autobots and humans declare that they're with Optimus all the way, though as they depart to begin making their preparations, they all share the same thought without having to say it. If Optimus has opted for an attack rather than a stealth mission, then this may mean he intends it to be their final confrontation with the Decepticons. The Harbinger is abuzz with activities the Autobots and their human friends prepare for war, a grim prospect that has all assembled on edge, though also a strangely hopeful one, as once this battle is done, then perhaps at last rebuilding can begin, and old scars can be allowed to heal. Feeling they should use every possible tool in their arsenals to avoid a most grisly death, Starscream approaches Raph and Ratchet to question if they found anything in the depths of the derelict ship that might prove useful, with the smallest human saying that actually he did, before leading Starscream into a lab. Here 5 blank protoforms hang suspended on the wall along with a terminal that carries information on cloning, with this causing the Jetbot's optics to proverbially light up as he immediately imagines 5 duplicates of himself defending him as he confronts Megatron and wipes that smug, snarling grin off his disgusting face. However, this is just a dream, as when he proposes the idea to Prime, the red and blue leader flatly refuses, while beside him, Bulkhead chuckles that it's probably for the best, as if the other Screamies are just like him, they'd all likely flee at the first sign of danger, making them no use to anyone. Gruffly, Ratchet agrees that while this may be, there is another way they could make use of the protoforms, or at least 2 of them. This reminds Optimus that Miko and Wheeljack did recover those 2 Predacon fossils, so if they were able to use them in conjunction with the cloning data, they could have 2 Predacons fighting on their side. Frantically, Starscream rebuts that they could also triple Megatron's supply of monsters, since while those things are supposedly sentient, there's no telling if they'd agree to fight for the Autobot cause. However, here Ratchet replies that he might have a workaround for that, asking Raphael if he may borrow his phone. Then, once he has it, he sets to work cloning the 2 Predacons. Due to Ratchet's scientific genius aided by Raph and Starscream, it takes far less time than it did Shockwave to create Predacons, so that before long, two of ancient Cybertron's apex predators stand before them. It is here that the Docbot reveals his plan to make allies of the beasts, with it in fact just being Megatron's plans to expose Starscream's misdeeds, as he pulls out the phone and plays Shockwave's transmission reporting that he had terminated all the other Predacons. Grinning that the Doctor is a devious side after all, Starscream joins in on this, asking if the thought that their brethren were exterminated in their sleep does not anger the pair, and as he had hoped, the two Predacons let out joint furious roars. Unfortunately, these are accompanied by gouts of flame breath that very nearly melt through the ceiling of the lab, though this is why Optimus is present, as manifesting his sword, he slashes cleanly through one of the walls, a rather primitive display of strength, but one the Predacons can respect as they calm down. Pleased by this result, even if he finds no pleasure in being made to use force, Optimus then requests they revert to their robot mode so they can speak. As the pair had not known they were capable of such a transformation, this takes a minute. Though, due to not needing to discover this on their own like Predacon did, they manage it, becoming hulking robots and introducing themselves as Darksteel and Skylynx. Nodding, Optimus greets the pair, and in a humble voice asks that they join his forces for their upcoming fight against the Decepticons, since just like they destroyed the other Predacons, they also brought ruin upon his people, and turned their shared homeworld into a graveyard, so it is essential they defeat them here, as that is the only way they can revive Cybertron, and that both Autobots and Predacons can have a future. Inspired by this, Skylynx is the larger and therefore more dominant Predacon bends his knee to Optimus, agreeing that on this day their forces shall be as one. Giving the pair a grateful smile, Optimus then looks to Starscream, saying that he will be the Predacon's commander, an order that comes just as much of an unwelcome surprise to the Jetbot as it does to his new subordinates, with all three demanding to know why. Sagely, Optimus answers that as Starscream himself said back in Scotland, he is the Autobot with the most experience when it comes to Predacons, so it is only natural that he lead them, and seeing no way to argue this, the defector merely lets out a strangled gurgle as the pair of Predacons close in on him and growl that he better not be the weakling he appears, or they'll tear him to shreds and melt the remains down to slag. Unfortunately for Starscream, this bullying persists long after Optimus and Ratchet have left the duo in his care, that he is almost glad when RC arrives through the Grand Bridge a little while later, as her threats are at least less brutish. Thankfully, it seems in the wake of her talk with Wheeljack, she has at last reached a point where she can abstain from killing him on sight, though this is about all the Jetbot can hope for, as when she looks at him, there is still unmistakable hatred in her optics. However, one person she is at least happy to see is Jack, as bending down, she apologizes for not recovering his mother in time. However, she promises she will rescue her and Agent Fowler once they're aboard the warship. Nodding, Jack replies that he has no doubt about it, though all the same, he's going with her, since they're partners, and she needs someone to keep her out of trouble. Sighing fondly that he's gotten reckless without her around, RC reluctantly agrees, since she knows he won't be able to sit still while his mum's in danger. Though, this does come with a caveat that he's to stay with her at all times, an order the black-haired boy has no problem agreeing to. Unfortunately, when Miko attempts to make a similar appeal to Bulkhead, this is shot down, as due to never scrapping Hardshell and being recognized as a wrecker, she's told to stay home with a warning that if he catches her trying to sneak after them, he will toss her head first through a ground bridge. Speaking of, Raph also decides to stay behind so that he can operate the ground bridge, as this way, it will free Ratchet up to go with the others, as if there's going to be a big battle, they might need a medic on hand. Now with everyone assembled, the Autobots prepare to move out, though before they can, Smokescreen approaches Optimus, offering him the Forge of Solus Prime, as while he's held onto it since they came to the Harbinger, it rightfully belongs in the hands of a Prime. However, here Optimus declines, stating that after restoring him, its power has dwindled significantly, to the point where it only has a single use left, and one he is unwilling to spend carelessly. To that end, he feels it is best to entrust the Forge to Smokescreen for the time being, as while he may not have the power of a Prime to use its repairing capabilities, he has shown judgment, leadership, and bravery that make him worthy to carry it. Truthfully, the rookie isn't sure what to say to this, and so simply gives a salute before slinging the weapon over his back and forming up with the others as Optimus explains the plan one last time. This assault will be carried out in two waves, the first of which comprises of Optimus, Starscream, and the Predacons as the ones capable of flight, with the four of them approaching the warship directly from the air in an attempt to draw the attention of Megatron and his forces. This will allow the second team made up of RC, Bulkhead, Wheeljack, Bumblebee, Ratchet, Smokescreen, and Jack to ground bridge directly into the ship, allowing them to catch their enemies off guard. Then, once they have established a foothold on either end of the ship, they'll begin pushing towards the center in an attempt to pinch the Decepticons and force a surrender. With this settled, the first team take flight, with Optimus using his wings while Starscream and the Predacons transform. Over the comm, Miko relays the warship's coordinates, with this allowing the strike force to close in without issue, though, due to wanting to be seen, they don't bother employing stealth, instead favoring a frontal assault as they begin a strafing run along the hull. Naturally, the Decepticons attempt to fight back with their turrets, though summoning his upgraded blaster, Optimus begins destroying them, while Starscream and the Predacons follow suit with their missiles and flame breath respectively. Due to their enemies being surprised, it only takes 2 passes to destroy every cannon, leaving the warship defenseless and freeing them up to land on the flight deck. Reverting to their bot modes, the group then bust their way inside, where unsurprisingly a group of Vehicons stand at the ready. However, what they are not ready for is the full power of Optimus Prime, nor do they stand a chance against 2 ancient Cybertronian warriors who revel in this violence as they tear the defenders apart. Then, when there is no one left to stand in their way, they start running down the corridor, intent on reaching the center of the ship as quickly as possible to rendezvous with their allies. Speaking of, now that the A-Team are inside, Starscream gives the signal for Raph to fire up the ground bridge, and taking this as their cue, those aboard the Harbinger charge through the portal, weapons blazing as they arrive on the bridge of the Decepticon warship. As planned, this takes the bridge crew by surprise, and as many fall before they can react, one among their number, that being Soundwave, manifests a ground bridge of his own and flees. This strikes those who know him as odd, since while the mute communications officer is many things, a coward isn't one of them, so if he's fled somewhere else, he must have some grander plan than just saving his own skin. Making note to keep an optic out for him as they begin Phase 2, the group set to work accessing the ship's systems, whereupon Ratchet swiftly deactivates all locks and security systems on board, before severing the internal comm network, so now the cons can't coordinate their movements or call for backup. Finally, Ratchet gives everyone a copy of the vessel's schematics, since they'll need it if they don't want to get lost. Then, as he and Smokescreen settle in to hold the bridge, they watch as Wheeljack and Bulkhead roll out as one team, while Bumblebee, RC, and Jack form the other. Their mission, to secure as much of the warship as they can while making their way towards the back to rendezvous with Optimus and his team. Back with them, having dealt with a few more small groups of Vehicons who refuse to stand down, the 4-bot squad have come to a fork in the road. Figuring they can't allow either path to remain uncaptured in case Megatron or one of his stronger lieutenants is there, Optimus instructs his subordinates to split up, with him going one way, while Starscream, Darksteel, and Skylynx go the other. Noting their understanding, the trio break off, though rather than take the direct line towards the center as he perhaps should, Starscream instructs the Predacons to follow him down a detour. Gruffly, Skylynx asks why the leader is going off the beaten path. Though in his usual testy way, Starscream replies that just down that passage is the vault, and it is something that was stolen from him, which he was unable to reclaim last time he was here, though if there's any hope of achieving Prime's dream of restoring Cybertron, they must get it back. Smirking, Darksteel questions why they don't just get it when they've won the battle, since this detour is a waste of time when they could be ripping up Vehicons. Though holding his ground, the Jetbot insists that it might be too late, as when Megatron realizes he's going to lose, he might have the Omega Key destroyed in a final act of pettiness. After all, it's what he'd do in that situation. Unfortunately, Starscream is not the only one here capable of predicting his enemy's movements, so when the trio enter the vault, they see a familiar and very unwelcome face waiting for them, Shockwave. In his analytical voice, the Cyclopean scientist states that he knew Starscream would come here, as he is always at the whim of his emotions. In this case, his guilt at losing the Omega Key, and his hubristic belief that he must be the one to reclaim it, both of which were simple to predict and exploit. He then raises his cannon arm, having no need to posture or pontificate when he can simply blow Starscream away and set to work dismantling this Autobot assault, though it seems it's already too late, as having recognized his voice from the recording as the one who terminated the other Predacons, Darksteel and Skylynx transform into their beast modes and lunge at Shockwave, pinning him down so there is no escape from their gnashing fangs, razor claws, and smelting flames. True to his stoic nature, Shockwave does not even scream as he experiences what must surely be an utterly agonizing death, with even the vengeful Starscream finding it a little revolting when he sees what remains of his old rival once the Predacons are done with him. Nonetheless, as he strolls over and plucks the final Omega Key from its case, he admits that in spite of himself, he's really come around on the pair, and is glad they're here. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, Bulkhead and Wheeljack find their paths blocked by none other than Dreadwing, who declares that today shall be the Wrecker's last day, as he will terminate them just like he did their former teammate Sea Spray. Cracking his knuckles, Wheeljack grunts that he never did pay old Dreddy back for that, while beside him, Bulk grunts that there's no time like the present. Then, as one, they transform and race towards Dreadwing in an attempt to sweep his legs. Though being a seasoned warrior, the Decepticon 2IC simply responds by becoming a jet and raining blasts down on them from above. Thinking fast, Wheeljack uses this chance to shift back so he can shoulder barge the plane into the corridor wall, though this just earns him an equally quick kick to the face as Dreadwing becomes a robot again too. However, before he can make use of Wheeljack staggering to break free of the Wrecker's pin, Bulkhead re-enters the fray as he slams a wrecking ball hand into his enemy's face, sending him skidding down the corridor while the Autobots give chase. However, Dreadwing does not take long to recover from this, burying a hand in the floor and coming to a screeching halt just as the Wreckers reach him. Done fighting on the defensive, he then pulls out a pair of explosives which he hurls at his foes, though rapidly shifting running to and from a car so he can get in front of Bulk, Wheeljack bursts forward and slices the mines before they can detonate, freeing his buddy up to land the punch that he was aiming for Dreadwing's jaw. This sends the plane staggering, and seeing a path to victory, Bulk keeps going, crouching low and shoulder barging the off-balanced Dreadwing so they both hit the ground while Wheeljack approaches and lays a blade against the downed Con's throat. Briefly, Dreadwing considers forcing a draw with his explosives by blowing himself up and taking out the two Autobots with him, like the Green Wrecker tried to do when they last met, though with his hands pinned by Bulkhead's weight, and Wheeljack more than likely able to decapitate him before he could move even if he could reach his weapons, Dreadwing reluctantly yields, putting on the pair of stasis cuffs once he is allowed to sit, still with that blade to his throat. When he is cuffed, the blue and yellow Jet admits that he is impressed by the pair, as they remind him of when he and his brother Skyquake fought together, with Bulk grunting that the feeling's mutual, and that he sees what Optimus means about him having honor, even if it is a fragged up Con type of honor. However, it seems Wheeljack is less impressed, as he tells Bulk to keep heading for the rendezvous point, and that he'll bring Dreadwing back to the bridge, since he doubts their supposedly honorable friend would have any compunctions about getting back in the fight if they left him alone. Having no reason to disagree, Bulkhead wishes his old buddy luck. Then as Wheeljack begins marching Dreadwing back the way they came, he continues on alone. As this happens, RC's group also come across a Decepticon of their own, though unlike Dreadwing who is spoiling for a fight, Knockout is huddled behind a stack of crates, evidently hoping no one would see him or force him to take part in the battle. In an angry tone, Bumblebee buzzes for the Decepticon doctor to get up, though as the Hot Rod does so, he makes a rather startling declaration that he wishes to join the Autobots. In a nervous tone, he then begins explaining how their group did wonders for Starscream, so maybe it'll happen to him, though being far too smart and now suspicious to fall for this, RC corrects that what he really means is he didn't think they'd make it this far in, and now that it seems that his side's losing, he wants to jump ship, right? Letting out a deep sigh, Knockout agrees that is one way to put it, though he can assure the two-wheeler that he will not be dead weight, as having spotted Jack beside RC, he grins that he knows where the little human hostages are being held. As expected, this catches the boy's attention, as he demands to know where his mum is, though tutting slightly, Knockout replies that if he told them, they'd scrap him the second he stopped talking, but he'd be happy to show them. Looking to RC as their de facto leader, both Jack and B ask what she thinks, as they're well aware this could be a trap. Though being in no mood for his smarmy games, the bike gestures for the Docbot to lead the way, while shaping one of her hands into a blaster, to make it abundantly clear what will happen if he tries anything funny. Meanwhile, in another part of the ship, Starscream has a new prize in hand as well, having stowed the Omega Key inside himself to ensure that it is not lost or damaged in the event that he actually has to fight. An unlikely occurrence, as with Darksteel and Skylink still loping by his side in their dragon forms, he highly doubts he will run into anyone who can oppose them. However, this is because he had not anticipated running into Megatron, as when the trio prepare to step through one of the many doors linking two sections of the warship, they suddenly find themselves face to face with the Decepticon leader himself, and worse still, he's armed with the Star Saber. Letting out a shriek, Starscream commands his two subordinates to get him like they did with Shockwave, though, as they will soon learn, this foe is in a whole other league from anyone they've fought before, as when Skylink attempts to pounce on him, Megatron simply swats the nuisance into a wall. Nonetheless, this does not stop Darksteel from taking flight and preparing to douse the former Gladiator in flames, though here too Megatron is able to retaliate with swift and deadly efficiency, swinging the Star Saber upwards and cleaving the Predacon's head from his neck before he can attack, in a clear demonstration that while he cannot use the Saber's full power, as he is not a prime, what he can draw out, coupled with his own might, is worthy of being feared in its own right. And feared it is, as coming to terms with the fact that one of his seemingly unbeatable Predacons is dead, Starscream orders Skylynx to retreat, and once he is sure the Predacon has obeyed him, he transforms into a jet and flies off in another direction, hoping against hope that Megatron will not follow him. To his great surprise, the Decepticon leader does not give chase, though being too savvy to take this as confirmation that he is safe, Starscream keeps running, ready to do so for as long as it takes. Returning to RC and her team, they have arrived in a small dingy makeshift lab, which Knockout grumblingly explains as his new station, since Shockwave was given control of the main lab. Luckily for the humans, Shockwave isn't interested in them, or they likely would be in pieces by now, a claim which clearly unnerves Jack, as he snaps the red bot to stop yammering and take him to his mum right now. Finding this more amusing than threatening despite the blaster poking into his back, the Decepticon doctor tells him to be patient, before pulling out a pair of large glass canisters, each of which contains one of the prisoners. As soon as they're open, Jack runs to his mother and pulls her into a hug, asking if she's hurt. Though patting her son's back gently, June assures him that she's fine. She just needs something to eat and a place to catch up on her sleep. While the Autobots cannot offer her a bed, Bumblebee does transform into his car mode so that June and Agent Fowler can lie down. And accepting this gratefully, the pair clamber inside. In a gentle tone, RC asks Jack if he wants to go with them. Though shaking his head, the boy replies that they can catch up later. He made a promise to her as her partner to watch her back, so he's sticking with her till the mission's done. Smiling that he's really grown up a lot since they met, RC becomes a bike, allowing Jack to mount up, and as Knockout's red sports car follows, the team begin heading for the bridge, since they want Ratchet to check the two rescued prisoners out before they ground bridge them back to the Harbinger. Unfortunately, this checkup might have to wait, as out of the darkness looms none other than Predacons. Spotting his Autobot enemies, the Great Dragon begins pursuing them, his flame breath barely missing their tailpipes. Hoping to end this peacefully, RC yells up at the King that they are not his enemies, and that it was Megatron and Shockwave he should be fighting, though it seems words will not get through to him, as with a feral screech, he dive bombs the two-wheeler, and attempts to crush her and Jack both with its claws. It is only thanks to the boys' shout that RC manages to dodge this in time, though all the same, she knows it's time for him to go, since clearly they can't outrun Predacons. Calling out to B, she instructs him to open his driver's side door. Then, as the yellow flap bursts open, she tells Jack to jump. That way Bumblebee can get all the humans to safety while she holds off the monster. Urgently, Jack protests that he's not leaving her, and that they're partners. Though in a morose tone, the bike replies that they sure are, and there's no sparking way she's losing another partner on this ship. Then, as she veers sharply to the side, Jack is thrown off her and into Bumblebee's waiting seat, with the scout taking this as his cue to book it, while RC transforms back into a bot mode and prepares to fight. Figuring this will not be difficult, Predacons lazily belches a torrent of flame down at his prey. Though showing off her agility and athleticism, RC avoids this, rolling out of the way and firing up into his underbelly with her twin blaster hands. While this does not do much damage, it does annoy the ancient Cybertronian, who at last gives RC his full attention as he flies low and attempts to strike her with his tail. However, once again the zippy two-wheeler evades this, becoming a bike mid-dive so she can drive up the wall before becoming a bot again and peppering her foe with shots from above. Then, before he can whip his tail up to impale her, she is a bike again, using gravity to zoom back down the other side. Growing a little frustrated now, Predacons next attempts to land atop the Autobot, with RC only avoiding being crushed by inches, though sadly, she cannot escape the aftershock, which sends her crashing into a wall and forces her back into her regular form. Seeing this as a chance to end things, Predacons comes in for a bite, one RC also only narrowly avoids by throwing herself to the side. Though it does give her an idea, as while Predacons' armor may be too tough to damage with her shots, one powerful blast down the gullet might be enough to finish him off once and for all. Reverting to her bike mode, she then starts zigzagging between the beast's legs and running over his claws, which as she had hoped, causes him to roar in agitation, and so seeing her chance, she rolls back into view and aims both blasters up at his mouth for a point-blank charge shot. However, as she emerges, this is not all she sees, as unbeknownst to her, this roar had not been the only thing emanating from his throat, as there is also that deep orange light which indicates an incoming burst of flame breath. In her prone position so close to his mouth, there is nothing she can do, so that as the fire cascades over her a moment later, she can see nothing but burning brightness, and then blackness. Returning now to Optimus, he is at last made to the rendezvous spot at the dead center of the warship, though it seems he is the only one. While he has faith in his team, the Autobot leader can't help but also worry about them, so much so that he almost misses the whirring of a ground bridge directly behind him. Turning back in the hope that it is one of Raph's, he is instead met by a sharp pain against his neck, as something thin and black emerges from the portal and strikes him. At once, his entire body goes rigid, and due to being mid-turn, he rather gracelessly falls back and through the portal. In an instant, Optimus finds himself outside, as he crashes down hard against the floor of the flight deck he arrived on, and as the green light of the ground bridge fades, he sees the one who brought him here to be none other than Soundwave, one sharp-fingered hand clutched around the immobilizer. As Soundwave is mute and Optimus cannot speak considering he is frozen by the ancient weapon, the pair share no words as they stare at each other, though there is no need to, as wrapping his other hand around the crest on Optimus's head, Soundwave begins dragging his prone form towards the edge of the deck, his intent clear, that even if he's not strong enough to kill a Prime, the fall from this height surely will. Meanwhile, back inside the ship, Starscream has unknowingly passed the rendezvous point, being too caught up in his fear of what Megatron with the Star Saber can do to spare much thought for direction. In fact, the only thing to snap him out of his panic is the horrifying sight that befalls him as he enters a new corridor. RC, her blackened body twisted and half smelted, with it seeming the only reason she is still alive is her indomitable willpower. Reverting to his bot mode and landing beside her, Starscream crouches down to examine his friend. A strange thought considering he has never had one before, and the one he chooses happens to hate him, though all the same, that is what she undeniably is to him. In a low voice, the Jetbot scolds that he bet she wound up this way by doing something noble. After all, he did tell her doing stupid noble things would end this way, though, in a stupid noble act of his own, he gently lifts her with plans to head for the bridge, since perhaps Ratchet can still save her. Unfortunately, due to not being the strongest of bots, he cannot move very fast while lifting his comrade's weight. Not that he could afford to move much faster anyway considering RC's condition. However, due to this slowed pace, there is nothing he can do when he rounds a corner and comes face to face with Megatron once again. Were he to abandon his friend to her fate and flee, perhaps he could save himself. Though in that moment, such a thought does not occur to him, only thinking of ways both he and RC could escape. However, it seems that is not either of their fate, as a moment later, he feels the star saber pierce his chest. The pain is excruciating, though mercifully, other things come along to draw his attention, like the feeling of energon leaking from his mouth, or the weakness in his servos as he collapses against a wall unable to even stand. While leering down at him, Megatron taunts that this time there will be no escape for his slippery former subordinate. Though, he supposes he does owe Starscream some thanks, since it was through his two failed attempts to scrap him that he was reminded of a lesson he learned in the pits of Kaon. Making an enemy die slowly is all well and good, but when one truly wishes to win, the best method is cold, hard steel. Now he's off to share that lesson with Optimus, so he hopes Starscream will pass on his regards when the two of them are reunited as part of the All-Spark. Returning now to Bumblebee, as one of the only Autobots not in mortal peril, he, Knockout, and the humans arrive on the bridge, reuniting with Ratchet, Smokescreen, and Wheeljack. Spotting the red sports car, Ratchet questions if he's another prisoner, though buzzing in the negative as he resumes bot form. B explains everything that has happened since they parted ways. While everyone is troubled by the idea of RC fighting Predacon alone, none are more so than Smokescreen, as he simply cannot abide the notion that his allies might be hurt or worse, while he's cloistered safely on the bridge like a coward. And so telling B to apologize to Optimus for him, he transforms into a car and tears off, determined to help however he can. Due to pretty much every major player besides Megatron, Predacon, and Soundwave being either eliminated or captured, this is a fairly smooth ride, with the rookie soon reaching the meetup point where Bulk is waiting for him. Worriedly, Smokescreen asks if any of the others have shown up yet, with this fear only compounding when the Green Wrecker shakes his head, as that means Optimus, RC, Starscream, and the Predacons are all unaccounted for. Figuring there's no point standing around waiting anymore, Smokescreen instructs Bulkhead to make haste for the bridge along a different path than the one he just took, since maybe some of their friends simply got lost, or decided to try pushing ahead when they saw no one else at the rendezvous. Meanwhile, he'll keep heading towards the rear of the warship. Then, if he doesn't see anyone, he'll double back and meet up with everyone on the bridge. Hopefully by then everyone will be together, though, if they're not, at least enough of them will be to start making a new plan. Nodding, the X-Wrecker then takes off, while feeling as though there's no time to lose, Smokescreen does likewise in the opposite direction. Bodies litter this pathway, more than they were on the bow end, suggesting that Optimus and his team must have had the worst fight on their hands, with Smokescreen being relieved to see that at the very least, there are no familiar faces among the dead. Finally, after what feels like forever, but is actually very little time at all, Smokescreen bursts through the busted door to the flight deck, and it is here at last that he sees a face he knows, Optimus, still in the grasp of Soundwave, who by now is mere feet from the edge. In that moment, the young elite guardsman does not think, simply transforming back into a robot, and pulling the forge of Solus Prime from his back as he rushes Soundwave with a scream. Hearing this, Soundwave turns back just in time to have the immobilizer knocked from his hand. Then keeping up the war cry, Smokescreen raises the hammer over his head and brings it down onto Soundwave's visor, caving it in. For a moment, the mute menace stands perfectly still, no different from in life aside from the critical damage to his cranial casing, though this is not long lasting, as a heartbeat later, his grip on Optimus slackens and he tumbles off the edge of the flight deck. Letting out a sigh as he drops the forge, Smokescreen reflects on how this is the first time he's looked another bot in the face and ended them, with it being far uglier than the glorious life of a soldier he imagined when he was a cadet. Nonetheless, now is not the time to wallow, and so grabbing up the immobilizer, he quickly restores Prime, who upon forcing the stiffness from his joints and mouth thanks the rookie for his assistance, as this is twice now he has proved instrumental in saving his life. Noting that it's his pleasure, Smokescreen helps his leader back to his feet, but before the pair can head inside to find the others, they spot a new figure standing in the doorway, having evidently been drawn by Smokescreen's cry. Predacon, still in his beast mode. Energon still pounding his auditory senses from everything that's just happened, the youngest Autobot hastily gathers up the immobilizer and charges the Predacon. This is his chance to take down one of their strongest enemies, and help bring this conflict to an end. This is his chance to crunch. The sound of metal crushing metal fills the flight deck, as Predacon lunges forward, with his gargantuan mouth, not only bites down on Smokescreen's weapon, but his arm, severing it just below the elbow. In that moment, the race car is in too much pain to even scream, let alone fight, so that as the beast tail whips around to strike him, he is sent crashing in a heap where he lies, unable to bring himself to move. Standing up now, Optimus urges his young subordinate to rest, promising to finish what he started, though this is just what Predacon wants, as after their last meeting on this deck, the ancient king's spark burns with a desire for revenge. To this end, he is the first to strike, lunging forward to bite down on him as he did Smokescreen. Though taking flight, Optimus manages to easily avoid this before raining several blaster shots down upon the beast from above. above. Considering this very move is what he seeks payback for, this only enrages Predacon more, as he takes this guy after him, though as Optimus will prove, while the Predacon is faster, he is a more skilled warrior, narrowly avoiding the flame breath attack his opponent launches up at him, before summoning his sword and slashing down across Predacon's maw. Bellowing with both pain and fury now, the ancient dragon comes around in midair. While hovering in place, Optimus prepares himself. What he's about to try will require perfect precision, though if he can line his thrust up with Predacon's optic, he can strike his central processor and end things quickly and painlessly. Or at least, that is what he thinks until something painful strikes him in the back. Turning to face the source, he sees none other than Megatron striding into view, his cannon arm raised to fire a second shot at his rival. However, this will not be necessary, as a moment later, Predacon slams into the distracted Optimus, driving him hard into the deck while snarling down at him. Leering menacingly, Megatron praises his pet, saying that together they have won a great victory for the Decepticons. Then, as he raises the Starsaber high, he prepares to end his nemesis as he did Darksteel. And he would succeed if not for the consequences of that prior kill, as before he can bring the blade down, Skylink swoops in, a vicious snarl tearing through his mechanical throat as he strikes Megatron, then leaps back to avoid that demon sword slash. It had taken him a while to catch the Decepticon leader's scent among all the others who'd been running and fighting throughout the ship, but using his superior Predacon abilities, Skylynx had found it, and now he has cornered the one who destroyed Darksteel, and so will avenge his fallen brother. However, it seems Megatron is not the only one Skylynx will have to contend with. As shifting back to his robot form and subsequently releasing Optimus, Predacon demands to know how another Predacon is here, and doing the same, Skylynx replies that he was revived by the Autobots, and now fights beside them for the future of their people. Coldly, Predacon snarls the only one who decides the future of their people is him, their king, though when he commands Skylynx to bow, the smaller Predacon instead attacks. Leaping back into his beast mode, Skylynx attempts to cleave Predacon in half with his talons, though shifting back just as fast, the Decepticon ally parries this with one of his own claws, then bites down on Skylynx's neck. Letting out a screech of pain, the good Pred tries desperately to bat him away with his wings, though when this proves unsuccessful, a recovered Optimus intervenes, firing several shots into the King's side that forces him to disengage. Though he cannot speak in this form, Skylynx's gratitude is apparent, as he lets loose a jet of flame that stops Megatron in his tracks as he had been rushing in to impale Optimus from behind. Recognizing that they work better as a team, Optimus rushes to his ally's side, and despite the chaos of the battle, respectfully asks if he may climb onto his back. Rolling his optics as if to agree, but only in the gruffest way possible, Skylynx lowers himself, and as Optimus sits astride him, he raises his blade high, before declaring to Megatron that today, one shall stand, and one shall fall. Snarling that the one to fall will be Prime, Megatron commands Predacon to come to him. Then, as he flies by, the Decepticon warlord leaps onto his back. Roaring angrily at the sight of two of his enemies united, Skylynx lets out a burst of flame breath. While covering his ally, Optimus opens fire on Predacon. Unfortunately, being the larger and stronger Predacon, the King simply soars out of the way, and refusing to let the one who scrapped Darksteel go, Skylynx gives chase, with the two pairs soon circling the warship. As Predacon has a head start in his flight, there is little Skylynx can do during this next stretch of the battle beyond continuing closing in, with it therefore falling to Optimus to be the primary combatant, firing shots that attempt to slow the opposing mount down. However, this is where Megatron comes into play, as brandishing the Starsaber almost tauntingly, he slices through each blast, causing them to go flying off harmlessly. Cackling at Prime's failure, the Decepticon leader then commands his servant to go on the attack, and bellowing like a mad beast, Predacon performs a sharp aerial turn. Then, as Skylynx comes into range, he lets loose a burst of flames. Desperately, the smaller Predacon does the same, with this managing to match the Monarch's power, so that the two flames cancel each other out as the pair of ancient Cybertronians pass each other by. As this happens, both Optimus and Megatron swing their blades, though due to the speed with which the Predacons are flying, these narrowly miss each other, forcing them to try again. Sharing the same thought in that moment, the two leaders instruct their mounts to perform a frontal assault. Then, as the Predacons rake their claws across each other's flanks, Optimus and Megatron bring their swords up for one final clash, the ancestral weapon of the Primes against a sword no different from what any Cybertronian can manifest. In that regard, the outcome seems obvious, with Megatron leering that he wins. Though, as their weapons spark against each other, something peculiar happens. Whether it is because the Starsaber refuses to slay its rightful master, or because in the hands of Megatron it is just another blade, and one he treats with no respect like all his other tools, the Starsaber shatters when struck by Optimus's sword. For a moment, Megatron attempts to cry out in rage, though this quickly becomes pain, as with his weapon gone, there is nothing to defend him from the slash Optimus carves across his chest. It is not a mortal wound like the ones he has inflicted on others, but it is enough to break the Decepticon insignia on his chest, and to send him tumbling forward and off of Predacons' back. Seeing Megatron fall, Optimus retracts his blade and reaches out a hand to catch him, as despite all he's done, he still feels compelled to try and save his former friend. However, before he can grab his hand, Skylynx backs up as Predacon had been in the midst of trying to bite him once again, so that instead of the smaller Predacon, it is Megatron who finds himself caught between the fangs of his monster as they clamp down and cleave him in half, ending his life. No one speaks as the two lifeless halves of Megatron clatter to the deck of the warship surrounded by the broken pieces of the Star Saber, as everyone must grapple with their own complicated feelings on the situation. That is aside from Skylynx, who feels nothing but triumph as he lands back on deck. Climbing down from the Predacon's back with his thanks, Optimus surveys the bot who at different times was his hero, mentor, friend, nemesis, and now victim, while from above, Predaking flies off into the boundless blue, his oath of allegiance having been to a master who is now gone. With the departure of Predaking and Megatron's fall, the battle, and more importantly the war is finally at an end, and so rounding up the last few Decepticons and Vehicons, the Autobots must figure out what to do with them as they move into peacetime. For most, the answer seems clear. They will be sent to the brig to await trial, though this is not the case for Dreadwing, as when Optimus returns to the bridge where the second-in-command has remained, he extends one last offer to become an Autobot, since he fought with honor throughout, and the Decepticon movement is over. However, rather than being met with gratitude, Dreadwing responds with anger and defiance, stating the movement is only over when all those who are loyal to it have abandoned it, so he will take imprisonment over betraying his master, with the promise to tell the story of the mighty Lord Megatron for as long as his spark still shines. Respecting the other bot's principles, Optimus does not try to dissuade him, instead gesturing for Bulkhead and Wheeljack to take him away, or nervously, Knockout questions what's going to happen to him. In a steady tone, the Autobot leader replies that while he has committed many crimes, Bumblebee is vouched for his defection, meaning he will be allowed to join their ranks if he so desires, though he has much work ahead of him if he wishes to make amends for his past transgressions. With the matter of the enemy now dealt with, it is time for Optimus to turn his attention to his allies. Thankfully, Ratchet is able to assure him that by making use of the Decepticons' medical supplies, he will be able to install a new hand for Smokescreen without issue, a prospect that excites the rookie somewhat as this will be his first battle scar. However, the outlook is not so good for RC and Starscream, as having been found by Bulkhead while looking for his boss, the big bot had brought them back to the bridge where Ratchet's triage had allowed them to hold on, though this is just delaying the inevitable. Or rather, it is for one of them, as still having a single charge left in the forge, Optimus knows he can save one ally, though the decision of which is not one he feels is his right to make alone. Looking down at the pair who have fought so bravely for the cause, Optimus requests their input, not as their commander, but as a comrade, and as Starscream looks up at him and then across at RC who is lying beside him, he finds himself conflicted. Naturally, a selfish part of him wants that lifeline for himself. After all, he only got stabbed because RC needed saving, so if anything, he deserves it, right? However, this is overruled by a larger voice in his head, one that sounds disturbingly like Prime, as it reminds him that he was injured because he was willing to put his life on the line for a friend he wanted to save, a friend he wronged, and who had all the reason in the galaxy to scrap him but didn't. If one of them is to live, it should be her. Turning his red optics back to Optimus, Starscream says as much, with the blue and red bot nodding solemnly as he states the Jetbot has the spark of a true Autobot. Then, as he brings the head of the forge down upon RC, a powerful light bursts from it, and when it fades, the two-wheeler is not only good as new, but seemingly upgraded just like Prime himself was. Starscream is glad he got to see proof that his sacrifice was not in vain. Then, as the Autobots crowd around him, he gets himself into a more dignified position and closes his optics, ready to become one with the All-Spark. However, nothing happens, with this causing Starscream to purse his lips as this waiting is getting annoying, and the pain in his chest is still agony. Opening an optic just a crack, he questions if Ratchet disconnected him from whatever was keeping him alive, and when the Docbot nods, he closes the optic again and prepares for the end. But, once again, he receives nothing, still feeling himself lying uncomfortably on the cold bridge floor with a mortal wound from where Megatron impaled him. Now more than annoyed as it seems fate has intervened to ruin his heroic sacrifice, Starscream demands to know what's happening, with Ratchet scanning him and stating that while his spark is diminished from all the damage he took, it isn't extinguishing, which surely makes him some kind of mutant. Indignantly, the Jetbot questions if this means every time he was afraid of dying it was for nothing, To which Ratchet shrugs that apparently so. Looking over to RC now, Starscream questions if the fact he was willing to die for her at least makes up for Cliffjumper, though flatly, the blue two-wheeler replies that no, it doesn't. But having now seen him lie dying, she doesn't feel the need to end him personally, so perhaps with time he can start regaining her trust. Then, without another word, she saunters away to test out her new abilities, wondering if she can fly from this upgrade like Optimus can, while Starscream screeches at her not to walk away from him like that, though there isn't much he can do about it beyond lie, reason, and grumble at Ratchet to give him something for the pain, since even if the Star Saber stab can't kill him, the agonizing sensation of a hole in his chest still keeps him rooted to the spot. Following the last of this business aboard the warship, the Autobots at last return to the Harbinger, though all are aware this will likely be for the last time, as now that they have the last Omega key in a ship to get them home, it is time for them to return to Cybertron and restore their world. As the atmosphere is toxic to humans, Raph, Jack, and Miko all know that they can't go with their friends, and so share a heartfelt goodbye with the Autobots, especially their guardians. Though never one for mushy goodbyes, Starscream simply tells them to keep doing those strange organic things they do, like eating and growing. Though, seeing through this, they all grin that they'll miss him too. However, one Autobot they do not have to say goodbye to is Ratchet, as with Predacons still somewhere on Earth and other threats likely to pop up, he is elected to stay behind. Understanding his old friend's feelings, Optimus tells Ratchet to be well, an instruction he is quick to return. Then looking to Knockout, he tells him that he's the Autobot doctor now, so he should be prepared to have his servos full, as this bunch are always coming home half scrapped. As is typical of Knockout, he rolls his optics and snarks that maybe he would have had an easier time in prison, though when Starscream smirks that this could still be arranged, the Red Racer falls silent, with the Jetbot stowing this away for later use whenever Knockout's griping gets on his nerves. And with that, the Autobots begin their voyage to Cybertron. All aboard the ship share a sense of nervous anticipation, as while they have faith in Optimus, it is anyone's guess if the Omega can truly restore their world. And if so, there is still so much to figure out, like how to locate other lost members of their race scattered among the stars and bring them home. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, Cybertron appears on the warship's view screen, and as they touch down, Optimus instructs his team to go ahead to the Omega Lock, as he has one piece of important business to attend to alone. When the others are gone, the Autobot leader makes his way to the hold, where wrapped in shroud are the pieces of Megatron's body. Gathering them up in his arms, Optimus then takes flight, soaring above the ruined skyline of their home, though nowhere here is their destination, with him instead descending deep underground to the Well of All Sparks. Due to being a sacred place, there is great solemnity to Optimus's movements as he lands softly and kneels beside the pool. Then, as he lowers Megatron's body into it so that he may become one with the All Spark, he makes a silent wish that in the next life Megatron's unyielding nature can be put to use for better things, and when that day comes, he hopes they can stand together as friends once again. Meanwhile, the other Autobots have made their way to the Sea of Rust, with RC leading the way now in a vehicle form that while still lithe and agile is better suited for any terrain. Above her flies a now repaired Starscream, who due to his jet mode has the best view, spotting the Omega Lock long before the others and likewise being the first to reach it. Not long after, the rest of the team arrive, and as he, RC, Smokescreen and Bumblebee raise their keys, the shrine once again reforms. Then, as Optimus lands beside them, they place their keys in the lock and watch their world change. In an instant, the smoggy skies become clear and the rusty browns of the landscape become shining silver. Beaming, Bulkhead declares that it's the Cybertron of old, good as new, though shaking his head, Starscream corrects that it's not, as having paid the price to learn from their mistakes, this Cybertron will be better and more united. As one, everyone nods, be they Predacon or Wrecker, Ex-Decepticon or Prime. Then, on Optimus's command, they transform and roll out, as there is still much to do. And that's where we'll leave this series. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.